welcome reception yesterday evening. I think everybody enjoyed very much. Thanks a lot to our host for arranging this so nicely. And today we are kicking off the second day that will have an equally interesting program for you. And the first part of this program this morning will be a highlight lecture and a plenary. But before introducing the highlight lecture speaker, I would like to draw your attention again, and maybe I can have the slide up here, that you still have the opportunity to engage with the speakers here by asking questions through our Slido system. So if we can have the slide up there, for those who don't have it yet, yes. Just scan the QR code, and whatever question comes up to you, please use this one, and you can also uprate questions from other participants. But now let's dive into the program, and it is my extreme pleasure to welcome and introduce to you the speaker of this first highlight lecture, that is titled New Frontiers, the Democratization of Space, and it will be delivered by the amazing Sirisha Bandla, Vice President of Government Affairs at Virgin Galactic. Sirisha, here you are.
Hello, good morning, everyone. I'm Sirisha Bandla, very excited to be here for the second day of the GLEX conference. So I have a few slides that I'm going to show. Oops, there we go. I already spoiled a little bit of it. So I'm going to spend the next 20 or so minutes talking about the democratization of space. So focused on commercial space and private sector space and opening space up for more and more stakeholders. But before I do that, I wanted to first put up this picture. This is one of my favorite pictures of one of my used-to-be favorite planets, Saturn. And I don't actually know why Saturn was my favorite planet when I was little. I think as a little kid, maybe the rings made me just curious about the planet, or perhaps the fact that Saturn's average density is less than water. So if we ever had a bathtub that could fit Saturn, it would float. And I remember as a little child, I drew a picture of Saturn in a bathtub for one of my school projects. So there's a lot to love about this planet. But if you noticed, I said Saturn was my favorite planet. After I went to space in 2021, a few months later, during an interview, someone asked me what my favorite planet was. And I instinctively said Earth. I didn't even think about it, I just said Earth. And I realized after that interview, after I had gone to space and had that incredible experience of viewing our planet, it became my favorite planet. So this is one of my favorite pictures because Earth is actually in this picture. So if you were paying attention earlier when I accidentally flipped to the next slide, you'll know where it is. But let's see if I can get this. There is Earth in this picture. We're there. That little pixel looks like a little speck of dust. And from this perspective, it looks so small. And from anybody that's observing Earth, or anything or anyone that's observing Earth from outside of where we are in the solar system, we look so very small. But it's a good reminder that when we're here, that we're anything but, and the life that we're living should be anything but small. So that is a very, tangent to what I'm going to talk about, but I wanted to just put that in perspective as I saw this picture recently. So we have an incredible plenary panel coming up to talk about commercial low Earth orbit destinations for humans, for research, for technology, and it's coming up after my talk. And I just want to let that sink in, that we are about to get together and hear from companies that are actually planning on investing private capital to build destinations in LEO. And those are destinations that we all hopefully physically can visit one day or can visit through our research, science, and technology development. So that's incredibly, incredibly cool. And it drives you to ask, how did we get here? Well, I don't know about you. I got here through a 15-hour plane ride that was delayed multiple times. I'm kidding. I'm just seeing if anybody's awake. No, how did we get to a place in industry where private companies are investing their capital to do these incredible things, to build LEO destinations? So let's talk about that. Let's talk about how we got to a point in our industry where commercial companies are building payloads, they're launching payloads, they're building habitats and wanting to go to the moon. So let's start at the beginning. So this is Sputnik. Again, just making sure we're all awake this morning. It's Sputnik. I was hoping everybody in the audience would say Sputnik together, but we'll work on that for the next one. But of course, the first satellite was Sputnik, launched in 1957 by the Soviet Union, a government satellite. So I'm sure that people in the audience know what this is. It's not, I can't hear anything, it's not the Death Star. It's not R2-D2's cousin. It is Telstar 1. It's a satellite that was funded by a private entity and built by a private entity. So this is a satellite that was funded by AT&T and developed by Bell Telephone Laboratories and launched in 1962. So Telstar 1 was capable of relaying television signals across the Atlantic Ocean and was the first satellite to transmit live television and other data signals across the pond from Europe to America. And after the successful transmission on July 11th, 1962, the then US President, John F. Kennedy, released a statement that called it an outstanding example of the way in which government and business can cooperate in the most important field of human endeavor. So that is definitely foreshadowing for the rest of my talk here. So the next set of satellites after Telstar 1 was SYNCOM 1 and SYNCOM 2, developed by the Hughes Aircraft Company. And after that batch, Hughes Aircraft developed another satellite called SYNCOM 3 in 1964, and it was the satellite that was first deployed to geosynchronous orbit to actually be leased to the Department of Defense, setting up public-private partnerships, and also, most importantly, was the one to telecast the 1964 Olympic Games for the first time from Tokyo to the world. So, see, for all the young people in the audience, there was a time where we couldn't watch every single Olympic sport on demand live. This is how you build a commercial market. You get people addicted to watching sports on demand, addicted to watching, I don't know, track and field, shot put at 2 a.m. because you can. And for me, I watch cricket at very early hours in the morning. But actually, so cricket is now going to be in the LA 2028 games for the first time in years. So everybody else is going to have to watch them at 3 a.m. I will be watching it live in LA because that's where I'm based. So if anybody's in LA, come say hi. But I'm really excited. And I know I just digressed, but it was very exciting for me to see that cricket is going to be in the 2028 games. So in all seriousness, this was the beginning of building commercial capabilities and economies beyond our planet's atmosphere. Now, all of these satellites that I talked about, while developed and had private investment, were launched by government-owned and government-operated launch vehicles. Now, launch really didn't become commercialized until much later because of a few different factors. One, the barrier to entry for launch is quite high. It takes a lot of upfront capital. Two, it's quite literally rocket science. The technology to develop it is complex, and to add on top of that, you have to make innovations in not only the launch technology, but manufacturing and operations to get something like that to be scalable profitably for commercial companies. And three, you have to have a robust market to support the high cost of the service. And in the beginning, that market hadn't developed, but as more and more commercial uses of space came online, both for satellites and human spaceflight, we started seeing that market grow, and some of the launch prices, as more entrants came into the field, come down. They're still quite high, but they're coming down. So the first recognized commercial launch provider was Arianespace. The Ariane 1, which launched in 1979, was the first launcher to be developed with the primary purpose of sending commercial satellites into geosynchronous orbit. And uniquely, which at the time was a unique concept, but it was designed to send a pair of satellites to orbit on a single launcher, bringing the cost for the launcher and for the customer down. So back to those technologies and way of thinking for commercial companies to reduce the cost of the service. So, however, for all of the reasons I listed earlier, there was still a lot of trouble getting the industry to, dare I say it, take off. So it really wasn't until later in the 2000s when we started seeing a lot more launch companies come in to service the robust market sector that was being developed. And in the 2000s, we started seeing more private investment in launch because the market for satellites were there. Communication satellites, Earth observation, and other satellites had really taken off at that point and created a market and a pathway for even more innovation in launch. So I think a lot of you in the audience know SpaceX was founded in 2002 when Elon Musk tried to acquire an upper Russian launch vehicle and was surprised on the scarcity, on the price, and the timeline to get something into orbit. So instead, being an entrepreneur, started SpaceX to develop a launch capability for himself and for all the priorities he was looking for. Virgin Galactic was started in 2004 after the NSRA X Prize, which we'll get into a little bit later. Blue Origin in 2000. So as I said, a lot of companies came in 2000 to develop this private sector launch capability. And it also drove more investment in space in general for on-orbit capabilities, for driving more startups into the space environment, and just getting the next killer app in space because we started seeing access to space open up. So one of the areas of commercial launch one of the areas that commercial launch has enabled is human spaceflight. And I'm sure it comes as no surprise that I am a huge fan of commercial spaceflight. So I want to take a little moment to talk about the commercialization of human access to space. So in 2004, and I skipped all of these boring stats because I know you can find them online. Rather talk about cricket and the Olympics, of course. So in 2004, Scaled Composites won the NSRA X Prize. And the NSRA X Prize is an award that was given to the first privately funded and privately developed vehicle to take humans to space and then do it again in 2 weeks. So it was showcasing that there was private investment available, private sector ingenuity, but also sustainability, that it wasn't just a one-off venture, that you could do it again and make it a business. So Spaceship One was awarded the NSRA X Prize by flying 2 pilots, Brian Binney and Mike Melville, to space and back and doing it twice. And that really kicked off the commercialization of human spaceflight. And I'm going to take one more tangent because this 2004 event is quite personal to me. So I know people who know me know that I have wanted to be an astronaut since I was very little. So I grew up I was born in Tenali, and I remember one of my very first memories was sleeping on my grandfather's roof and looking up at the stars and just seeing how bright they were, I almost felt like I could reach out and just touch the stars. And that was my very first memory of wanting to go to space. And since then, I just couldn't get it out of my mind. So everything I did was to go to space from there on out. So I learned all about the astronauts before me, how they went to space and tried to follow in their footsteps. I learned how to fly an airplane before I learned how to drive a car, which my mother was very thrilled about. And I decided to go into aerospace engineering. So I was doing everything I could to become an astronaut. Unfortunately, as much as we try to control our lives, we're often reminded in many ways that we are not always in control, and there are quite a lot of other factors that drive us to where we're going. And for me, in 2004, I found out that my eyesight had deteriorated. So I've always had pretty bad eyesight growing up as a child, but it wasn't until I was 16 years old in 2004 that my eyesight got to a point where I was disqualified from becoming a NASA astronaut. And I was looking at becoming a NASA astronaut because that was, at the time, one of the very few ways that people could go to space. And of course, I was devastated. I didn't know what to do. I looked around for other things that would interest me as much as space had interested me, but really couldn't find something that resonated as much as going to space and spaceflight did. So I was trying to figure out what to do until, coincidentally, in 2004, the NSRE X Prize happened. And I saw the NSRE X Prize. I saw Spaceship One go to space with Mike Melville and Brian Binney. I saw incredible investors and entrepreneurs step up, including Sir Richard Branson, after the NSRE X Prize, and state that they were going to take the technology of Spaceship One and create a company and technology based on Spaceship One to open space up for everybody and create a company called Virgin Galactic. So I'm seeing this in 2004 and thinking, okay, there's more ways to go to space than just NASA. I'm going to study hard and do all I can to go work for Virgin Galactic and go to space with them. This was in 2004, so I didn't realize that I manifested it as literally as I did that day and that year. And about 18 years later, I found myself on the tarmac with Spaceship One's successor, Spaceship Two, about to go on the first test flight of the vehicle with this wonderful crew next to me and test the vehicle for our future customers. So our whole role on the flight was to test the interiors and test the experience for our customers in the future. And my role specifically was to test the capability of this vehicle to conduct microgravity science. So I took up some research with me to conduct while I was in space. And of course, spoiler alert, it was a great vehicle to conduct microgravity research, and we conducted a lot of tests that day that made the rest of our flights for our customers very successful and comfortable. And of course, I'd be remiss if I didn't say, while I was doing all this work in space, I did not take it for granted. I definitely took a look out the window and took this incredible view of our planet in with every inch of my being. And I love this picture because this was taken on my first look outside the window. And I think a picture says way more than I can ever say, but I felt quite connected, probably even more connected to Earth than I ever have, even though I'm not even on the planet. It was like having an out-of-body experience, taking yourself out and looking back in at yourself. And there was nothing more inspiring and truly empowering about that experience. And that's really the reason that I'm excited to see more and more humans go to space, because there is absolutely no way you can go to space and see the planet and not come back and feel like you are empowered, inspired, and have a perspective shift on your life. So I want to pull on that thread a little bit more and talk about the humans that have gone to space. So for extra credit, this is Yuri, yes, Yuri Gagarin, the first person that has gone to space in 1961. And since then, multiple government agencies have built human spaceflight programs, creating vehicles that allow humans to go to space. But up until recently, all of those vehicles and the human spaceflight programs have been government-owned and government-operated. After 2004, we saw a lot more companies who had developed launch vehicles enter the human spaceflight environment and creating platforms that allow humans to go to space, to experience space, but also to conduct research in space. Because up until now, if researchers wanted to conduct research in space, it'd either go up on a satellite as an autonomous payload, or you would hand your payload off to one of the government agency astronauts that would conduct the science and the research for you in space. But with suborbital vehicles and with orbital vehicles by private companies, you're now able to, as a scientist and researcher, go up to space with your work and conduct your own work and your own research. So putting all of that into perspective, we had a little over 700 people have gone to space to date. And I'm using 2004 as the milestone and the platform for when human commercial spaceflight took off. So up until 2004, you've had about 440 people go to space. 0 people out of that group went up on commercial launch vehicles, and 7 of those people were non-government astronauts. So those were people that had paid to go to the International Space Station or otherwise experience space. One of those people that I included was a mission specialist from McDonnell Douglas, so it wasn't technically a government astronaut, but I included him in the 7 people. After 2004, we had 295 people go to space, 142 of those on commercial launch vehicles, and 127 of those people went as non-government astronauts. And, oh man, I just decided to do math in public, which could be very embarrassing for me. So it's 40% of people in the last 20 years have gone to space, and just under 20% under 20% have been non-government astronauts, which is incredible to think about the whole timeline of humans accessing space. You're seeing this exponential rise in people going to space, and I think it's quite exciting because you're seeing a diversity of reasons, whether it's for just the experience or whether it's for living and working in space or for conducting research. Campaigns and technology development. You're seeing a diversity in the people going to space. They're not just engineers and pilots, but they're also artists, lawyers, communicators, filmmakers. And I think that is what I find very exciting, that we're now going to be seeing spaceflight through the lens of so many more people from so many different areas on this planet. So, before I move on, I will just say I've talked a lot about commercialization of space because that is the topic of my talk, but I wanted to just give a nod to the government. This isn't commercial versus the government. It is a partnership with government. This is a slide from NASA just showing the fleet of vehicles that they've launched to different destinations. And they're doing, with their investment, audacious things and going to places that have no market for commercial. However, they're partnering with commercial to ease the investment needed and allowing commercial to take over those destinations that have a market, and they're able to become a customer. And these are very efficient and effective ways to further our reach in the universe. And I love this slide because these kinds of missions are expanding our knowledge of the universe, of our place in it, and they're doing it hand in hand in commercial. I mean, these are the missions that showed, that first image I showed on my first slide of the Cassini spacecraft taking that picture of Saturn came from one of these missions. So again, it's not government versus commercial, it's government and commercial as we continue our endeavors in space. So what's next? Commercial space, I hope you've taken away, is an enabler. So we're just at the cusp of more and more research into space. We're at the cusp of more technologies being developed to further our exploration of space, as well as better our lives here on Earth. And we're definitely at the cusp of sending more and more humans to space that are going to be experiencing space, living and working there, and seeing the beauty and that perspective shift that comes with it. So personally, I'm very, very excited about the next few years, the next decade, and what's going to be coming in space with both government and commercial companies. And one thing I'm quite excited for is what you're going to hear in the next plenary of commercial companies talking about habitats in LEO, where we can all hopefully go one day, or at least send our research and our technologies. So this is just the beginning. Hopefully this history lesson has set up a good foundation for some of the other plenaries that are coming on later today. So thank you.
Wasn't this exciting to hear from somebody who has seen it firsthand? Thanks a lot for this great introduction of today's plenary program with this highlight lecture, which you enjoyed very much. And now we are diving into the first plenary of today, which is titled New Frontiers, Evolution of Space Stations. And in order to moderate this, it is my great pleasure to welcome on stage the IAF President, Clay Mowry, who will introduce all the speakers. Clay, the stage is yours.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome. Welcome to Plenary 2, New Frontiers, the Evolution of Space Stations. I'm really happy to be moderating this panel today. We have an amazing set of speakers here to engage in this session, and I think Sarisha did a great job setting us up for this discussion and talking about the evolution towards commercial astronauts and launch systems. This session really is about change, and it's about vision. It's about how we went from a single, or where we exist today with a single multinational government-led research platform to a future filled with commercial, modular, privately built and operated space stations. Operating right now for 24 years, continuously crewed in orbit, the International Space Station represents the pinnacle of human cooperation in space. It is joined now by China's Tiangong and India's BAS space station that's planned for launch in 2028. And a pipeline of commercial space stations that are now on the drawing board and actually in the factories now being built, with modules being built and getting ready to launch. So we're watching this shift happen in real time. So it's an amazing moment to be watching this happening and watching the companies that are positioning themselves for this future. So, these space stations are also being built in a new way. They're modular systems. They have smaller footprints than the ISS, which is more than a football field, across when it's operating as it operates today. They're using rapid prototyping. They're developing modules in a way that's new, using new technologies and welding techniques and additive manufacturing in a lot of cases, and with commercially built products. So it should be a much faster and more flexible system, and really taking innovation and integrating the private sector into the design, not just a NASA-led effort. Really, it rewrites the playbook about how you would put together a commercial space station. In short, we are witnessing a transition from exploration to utilization. Low Earth orbit is no longer a destination. It's going to become an economic zone. So a few questions arise around that, around governance, access, legal issues, liability, safety, sustainability, and the return on investment that companies can expect to get from a space station in orbit. So we're going to talk about a lot of these questions. Again, I'm going to jump right into it now, and I'll introduce our panelists one by one, and they can join me here on stage to my left. So let's start with Max Out, the CEO of VAST. He's an aerospace, consumer electronics, and internet entrepreneur. He has 20 years of experience successfully transitioning technology developments into profitable commercial ventures. He launched and founded and scaled 4 companies, including Launcher, Mevo, and Livestream. So welcome, Max. Next, Michael Lopez Alegria, the Chief of the Astronaut Office and AX-1 Mission Commander for Axiom Space, LLC. He's a decorated NASA astronaut who returned to low Earth orbit for the 6th time in 2024 as commander of Axiom's Mission 3. This was the very first private mission made up of all government-sponsored crew aboard the ISS. We call him Mike LA in the space community, if you know him well. He's involved right now in both the operational and business development portions of Axiom. He has more than 40 years of aviation and aerospace experience in various roles as a naval aviator, a test pilot, a program manager, a NASA astronaut, and an ISS commander. He also holds the NASA records for EVAs, or spacewalks, 10, and cumulative time, 67 hours and 40 minutes. Very impressive, Mike. And he was inducted into the Astronaut Hall of Fame in 2021, so welcome, Mike. Next up is Thomas Pesquet, also an astronaut from the European Space Agency. He was the first person from France to command the ISS. On his first mission, he flew aboard a Russian Soyuz rocket, and he spent 197 days in space between 2016 and 2017 as a flight engineer for Expeditions 50 and 51. He recently served during Expeditions 65, 66, and 67 aboard the ISS, flying from April to November of 21, and flew aboard a SpaceX Crew Dragon. So welcome. Next is Roberto Provera, the Director of New Initiatives and Customer Solutions and Development for Exploration and Science at Thales Alenia Space. He currently serves as the Director of these new initiatives and partnerships. He has a background in program and portfolio management, business development, and engineering. Significant roles in projects relevant to space exploration, the ISS, and atmospheric reentry vehicles. And he is a member of the Board of Directors for Alltech. Welcome, Roberto. Next, Dr. D.K. Singh. He is the Director for Human Spaceflight at the Indian Space Research Organization, ISRO. He's a distinguished scientist, and before his current assignment, he was the Associate Director for Space Applications at their center in Ahmedabad. Over his 35 years with ISRO, he's contributed to payload systems design for communications and navigation satellites, starting with the INSAT-2 series of advanced communication satellites. So welcome. And last but not least is Sébastien Bard, who's the Associate Director for Exploration and Human Spaceflight at CNES, the French Space Agency. He's been involved in human spaceflight for most of his career. He was project manager for the GLEX experiment in cooperation with NASA. He was also head of the CADMOS Center, managing French experiments in microgravity aboard the Mir and ISS stations. And early in his career, he was appointed CNES's Associate Director for Exploration and Human Spaceflight. So welcome, gentlemen. I'm going to sit down and we'll start this session. So let's jump right into it. Mike LA, I'm going to start with you. How would you define the current mission of a space station?
Thanks, Clay. First of all, great to be here. Nice to see the smiling faces this morning, and I'm pleased to be up here with this esteemed panel. I would say that the mission above all is to continue human presence in low Earth orbit. Now that's sort of the headline, and the subtitles might be obviously conduct world-class research. There's a lot of communication that goes on between the crew members and their respective nations, I think, which continues to be a source of inspiration for people around the world. And then, of course, sort of in parentheses is this rubric of international cooperation. I mean, when we launched the ISS, everybody was thinking that its contribution to humanity would be the science that it brought down. But in fact, you could argue that, as the US and the Russians are sort of getting along in space, it is the only place where they're getting along. And I think this is a remarkable achievement that maybe was a little bit of a sleeper, but is now definitely true.
Thomas, any reflections? Do you agree with Mike?
No, I can definitely agree with Mike, with what Mike just said. And I think I remember some people actually suggested the ISS as a candidate for the Nobel Peace Prize back in the day, which it didn't go through because it has to go to a person. But I very much like the idea. If you look at the countries that work together on the ISS, and if you look a little bit back in histories, World War II, those were the countries waging war against each other. You know, Europe, you've got Italy, France, Germany, you've got Japan, you've got Russia, you've got the US. So having those people get along visibly and work together is a big achievement of the ISS. I'd say, if coming back to the question, what's the function, what's the mission of the space station? I think the very basic first step is to provide a living environment, right, for the people. If I take very basically your question, which, you know, research is important, all the rest is important, but first step is actually host the people, give them a living environment, and that's not an easy thing to do. And I remember my first mission on the Soyuz, and I'm sure Mike can relate to this. It felt very fragile until you got to the ISS. You know, it's a very small, tiny ship, very high, for 54 hours, the first mission. And then until you get to the station is a big ship, right? It would take a lot to make the station fall from the sky. So you felt much safer, and then you could really start to operate, start to perform your mission.
Wow, that's an interesting reflection. Dr. Singh, how does ISRO think about the role of or the mission of a space station? How do you think?
Yeah, thank you for the question. ISRO believes that the space station is going to be a laboratory for research, advanced research in the various domains. And our vision is to provide Indian as well as global researchers to access to the lab at a reasonable price, and the cutting edge research which can happen there, especially in the domain of life science and pharmaceuticals, it can be a lifesaver. So there can be a very good outcomes which can serve humanities for a long time. And for ISS, I also feel one more mission, whatever he said, beyond that, it is a test bed for your springboard for Moon and Mars. That also you have to test so many technologies which you can't afford to test far away from the Earth. So that also has been one objective of this mission.
So humanity in space, research laboratory, testbed for future exploration. I think if I can summarize that. Max, let me turn to you with the next questions, which is, you guys are a little bit late to the commercial LEO destinations program missions. How do you think about building a commercial space station to serve these purposes?
Yeah, so, you know, as the CEO at VAST, we are one of the hopeful candidates to have the honor to replace the International Space Station. It's our #1 goal to have this honor, and also to be able to carry on the legacy of international collaboration and opening a microgravity laboratory in space. We arrived late to the party. About 2 years ago, we decided that was our goal. And our unique approach and strategy has been to develop an actual commercial space station without NASA funding in record time, obviously with safety as an emphasis. And so 2 years ago, we launched the Haven 1 program. You can see the slide there. It's a single module space station due to launch next May, or May 2026, on a Falcon 9 reusable, and then followed 2 months later with a crew of 4 on a Dragon spacecraft that will dock and spend 2 weeks on Haven 1 and then come back home safely. So our big strategy is that if we do all of this on time before NASA select the successor to the ISS, we will be the world's first commercial space station, and we expect to be the only bidder to have actually done it. I represent a team of about 850 engineers and specialists. This is the primary structure, the qualification article from Haven 1, which we built in 6 months and successfully passed the proof, pressure test, and leak test, including the hatch and the window. And Haven 1 is due to be completed, fully integrated by the end of the year. So we're working super fast.
Fast timeline. I'll let Mike respond to that in a little bit. But Roberto, let me turn to you. Tell us, you guys have built some amazing pressurized modules and systems over the many, many years, right? What's flying now and the cargo systems. Can you talk a little bit about your guys' heritage, about how you think about building modules to keep astronauts safe in orbit?
Right. First of all, thanks for the invitation to this amazing panel. Yes, we are, I think, well known for developing pressurized elements for starting from the space station. Now it's a moment in which we also have to change our way to make business, because we see that we are in a transition from the government-owned station like ISS, and we are contractor for ESA for that, and to ASI. Now we have to relate with commercial companies. We are working to supply structures to Axiom, for instance, and the challenge now is to become from I would say change from a supplier to a business operator. That's what we have to do in Europe as well. It's a challenge, but that is what we're aiming at.
Thank you. Sebastian, we're talking about going from this shared platform, which has been up for 24 years now in operation, built on a premise of bartering between nations. It was no exchange of funds basis, as we like to say in the US, right? Where there was space agencies, ESA, NASA, JAXA, Roscosmos, bartering. How do you deal with the commercial space station? How does CNES think about how do you take advantage or utilize one of these platforms when it's really not been the model forever, really, for space agencies? How would you deal with this?
I don't know yet, in fact, because it's brand new. It's a real good question, because as agency, we can spend our money outside of France or Europe, because our money comes from taxpayer, and we need to spend to create activities or jobs in France or in Europe. So it's difficult to us to work directly, to have a direct contract with non-European organization. So we have to find a way, because if we want to send our astronauts into space, we have no choice, because we are not ready in Europe for the time being to send our astronauts by ourselves. So we have to perhaps to set up barter with his company by providing something, modules, I don't know, rack, food, what is interesting for them, or perhaps to encourage the creation of a joint venture, for example, between a company handling human spaceflight and European company. By this way, it will be easier for us to pay directly for the services, and we have to just to check that the same amount of money is spent in the European part of this company. This is an example, but I'm not yet a real answer.
So for the audience, I mean, we've had more or less a revolution in space procurement, I should say, at NASA over the past decade with the COTS and CRS program, CRS-1, 2, and into the Commercial Crew program, where it really went from NASA being the one that owned it to now providing this capability through commercial providers and being able to procure space as a service. So this was a fundamental shift and took a lot in terms of the legal and regulatory and basically the responsibility role. So it was a huge shift to commercial industry. Let me go back to Mike. Mike, commercial space stations. What's the business model? How are you going to make this work? So far, it's been a government-sponsored enterprise, and now we're trying to shift. What's the business model look like for commercial space stations?
Well, it's pretty similar, actually. We want, obviously, to have the same users of the International Space Station come over to our space station, but that's not enough, probably, to make it profitable. So, obviously, we want to open the ability to have other countries, other researchers, other individuals use the space station in addition to the, I'll say this, traditional partners. And also, we want to open up the activities they can do. So the government space station has certain restrictions on what it can do because it's basically using government money. So you can't really do product placement or shoot a movie or things that are purely commercial activities today on the ISS. That is a giant hole that we would like to fill with our other customers, be they movie producers or advertisers, or you can imagine it. Obviously, taking the investigation a bit further, for example, NASA and the other agencies would make an investigation as to how to produce something up until a certain point, but they wouldn't produce it at scale because, that, again, that's a profit incentive, which is not part of the government mandate. But of course, a commercial company would love to do that. So I think the sky's the limit. We like to talk about the platform as being a bit like the internet in the 90s. Nobody had any idea that you could pull a device out of your pocket and buy a car or a train ride or a trip or something like that which you can do without even thinking about today. So I think the sky is a limit, but there are multiple ways that we can anticipate making a profit in space in the future.
Max, do you have any thoughts on the commercial model?
Yeah, I mean, the first step is that, you know, without the existing partner of the ISS as customers to, you know, I think I can speak on behalf of all the CLD competitor, you know, we need Europe as customers, we obviously need NASA, we need Japan, we need Canada, and all the emerging nations, including the Middle East. And I don't think any of us can close the business model without that to happen. So back to your point about barter and how it was done, we have to work it out. We have to figure out a way to be partners with Europe. I think the barter concept, so long as we are dealing with values that are reasonable, that are commercial, so long as the cash flows are aligned, and so long as we need it, I think we'll be able to do bartering. Clearly, it won't be 100% because transportation, for example, right now it's still SpaceX as the only option we have in the United States. So I think it'll be unrealistic to expect 100% barter like it might be now, but I think we'll be able to get some of the way there. In terms of the commercial model, our view is that we're dealing with about 80% of the revenue from commercial, from government. And maybe there will be 10, 20% from private individuals doing important mission in some of the new market. And so one of the key for any winner is that we should be profitable on the current market. And while we're super excited about pharmaceutical manufacturing, media, all these new things that have been restricted on the ISS, we think it's really important that NASA choose a partner that can be profitable due to low cost on the current market, and then over time we'll unlock these other markets. So government still being the number one revenue source for us to be viable.
Let me just be clear on the barter that's being spoken to about here on the panel. These are hardware, you know, providing the Columbus module or the Canadian robotic arm in exchange for then NASA flying an astronaut for a 6-month stay aboard the ISS. So this is really a hardware for services kind of model. And now we're in more of a services, straight up services, unless you had hardware requirements. Is this basically how you think about it?
We have many hardware requirements. We might build a core module and platform in the United States, but we have to outfit the space station. We might have robotic arms. We might also have modules that are developed in partnership with Europe or Japan and then launched with local launch vehicle. So there's a lot of ways to exchange value. It might not be as, not extreme, but as perfect as it was for the ISS. But I think we can get there with local partners that are adding value services and some shared developed hardware. Or at least that's our commitment and our hope to do it.
Okay. Dr. Singh, you have the Gaganyaan system under development now, human rated. Max mentioned that we only have a couple of ways to get astronauts to orbit right now. So do you envision using Gaganyaan for servicing these other platforms, not just for the BAS?
For the BAS, even in Gaganyaan program, we are bringing our Mark III vehicle as a human-rated launch vehicle. And that also we want to position as other than SpaceX, what you are telling that only one way to go to the ISS. So the way we are positioning our program, we have a Gaganyaan, which will build the capability to go to space and come back. Then there are follow-on programs which we will introduce the docking capability in the Gaganyaan itself. And also keeping long-term vision, as yesterday it was discussed, for the moon landing. We are also building a new heavy lift rocket called NGLV. And that can be one of the low-cost rocket which can be positioned for other people to use. And of course, in our Bharatiya Space Station project, we would like to leverage on what other people have done. We don't want to reinvent all the wheels. But the model for engaging with the private companies, we would like to encourage them to collaborate with the Indian entities. Some Indian credible partner you have to find out. And have something which can be done in India through those companies, real technologies. So those things can be inducted on BAS or even in the Gaganyaan follow-on program. That is the way forward.
Okay. Roberto, I'm going to turn to you on this issue of barter in a way, okay? Because I know you guys also are building pressurized elements for the Cygnus system, for other things. How do you think about it going forward from a Thales position about there's cargo, there's elements that could be habitats. How does it work in a non-barter or even let's say there's some barters that may continue to take place? How do you think about it?
Well, first of all, the scenario, I think, has been depicted very well by Sebastian and Max. The point here is that the US government and NASA and the ESA will be very likely the big customers at the beginning. And of course, US government wants to spend money in US. Europe wants to spend money in Europe, Japan as well, I believe, and so on. So now the point is that the challenge is how at the industrial level and the agency level, we can have a model in which the market then becomes global. And that is, the first answer is, as we have already said, the barter. We in Europe are developing cargo service. That is, I think, a good asset to serve stations, provided that, of course, we are competitive, because it's a market, as Max was saying. So we have that as a tool for barter. I think as Europeans, we could also have a visible piece of a commercial station, a lab, for instance. And then, but that comes back to what I was saying before. Are we going to have a US lab, a European lab, a Japanese lab? I don't think that will work. It will be a global market. So we have to find some mechanism in which we barter, but there is also some exchange of money. Otherwise, I think it will be very difficult to stand with a business plan.
Okay. Thomas, Sebastian, let me ask you guys, are there lessons for CNES, for ESA, from the operations aboard ISS that you can help teach these guys? Mike maybe doesn't need to be taught the lesson because he flew so many times, but are there lessons for Max and the other CLDs about what you take away from doing work aboard the ISS?
Yeah, definitely. I think so. There's been dozens of years now of ISS operation in Earth orbit. So there's a ton of lesson learned after every 6 months mission. You know, we do intensive debriefs. And the good thing is things trend in the right direction, right? Over the years, things like stowage management, inventory. It doesn't sound like a big deal, but it actually is, because the ISS is like a submarine, right? For those who are not really familiar with space stations, it's not really the mass, it's the volume that's at a premium. It's very, very limited. You're pushing the walls constantly, and things like a storage module or storage space, because when the ISS was drawn on a drawing board or conceived, there was very little storage space, and nowadays there's stuff everywhere, and Mike can relate. We're constantly, doing logistics, moving cargo from one module to the next, only to open a panel because there's storage sitting on the panels and etc. So the control center engineers are doing a tremendous job of managing this. I don't even know how they do it because it's so complex. But actually, I'm thinking about the Japanese module. The Japanese module has kind of a closet or an attic that comes with it, and that's a brilliant idea. It's a module only dedicated to storage. NASA actually jumped on the bandwagon on this, and Thales provided the module, which is only for storage. But it's really something that needs to be considered. If that's the one, there's many points, but I don't want to speak for too long, but if that's the one point that I would stress, it's storage. You need to account for it. You need to figure out how to deal with it. It's going to grow inevitably because you can't throw stuff away on the ISS, and so you need to provide a way to manage it. I would say as well, maybe a place to do your hygiene that's dedicated, that's not in a corner of another module like on the ISS, but that's a bit maybe more too specific for now.
Sounds like my house. I need more closet space and a bigger bathroom.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah. Okay, Sebastian.
So it has been already said, but ESS is a unique laboratory in the world. We can perform experiment which cannot be performed on ground, except perhaps of the 0J plane, but for a very short moment. So it's a unique laboratory. Perhaps if I would like to create a new market, if I was a private company, I think it's difficult to mix some experiment with astronaut on board the station. This is nothing personal, but because of safety rules and so on, makes the experiment much more complicated. And if you want to have a low cost to make the access to microgravity easier, I think we have to think about a way to share astronaut activities and perhaps some experiment which can be conducted automatically, coming from ground, and for me is a way to simplify the access of microgravity, to create a new market, and so to decrease the cost.
Okay. We're talking about ISS, we're talking about BAS, we're talking about commercial space stations. We haven't talked about Tiangong, the Chinese station. How do you guys view Tiangong? Is it a competitor? Is it strategic? I think ESA has said you're not flying to Tiangong. Is that correct? I think
No. We actually, I think back in 2012, we started to talk to our Chinese counterparts. Back in the day, we even went to China, and then we had some exchanges at working level. But there was never the political will on both sides to make it materialize. There was a strong no on the US side at the time, and then we realized that our technology, talking about European technology, was so intertwined with NASA's technology on the ISS, then us cooperating with the Chinese was kind of, in a way, a proxy for the US technology going to China.
ITAR
in a way,
issue becomes an
ITAR became
issue,
kind of a big deal. And even on the Chinese side, I think politically they were not 100% interested at the time by the cooperation. But it was good. It was good exchange. They're very advanced. They know very well what they're doing. And now I think they're doing really well. And I've been following from a distance what's happening. Tiangong's a big success, and it keeps growing. So today, a competitor, not a direct competitor, I would say an incentive maybe to do good things on our side as well, because they are able to do good things, so we should be too. But not a direct competition. It's going to be interesting, like we were saying a little bit before, to see what happens in the near future. The Chinese space, there won't be one station per country. I don't think it's a likely scenario. There'll be some consolidation, some sharing, and it'll be interesting to see where the ball lies in that respect.
Dr. Singh, you mentioned before using the station and then going on to the moon for India. Is this, it's really the motivation? You don't view China as a competitor necessarily?
I don't think that we are competing with anybody. We have our own independent program driven by our own vision, and we want to do the things what is required for India.
Mike, Max, do you guys think about Tiangong or experiments flying there as opposed to your platforms?
I think that obviously geopolitics is dictating, how we can collaborate right now, and obviously the Chinese space station is more right now from the US, an adversary or a competitive angle. No, I think it creates a real incentive to make sure we don't have a gap. Right now we've led with the ISS for over 24 years, continuous presence in low Earth orbit, and we have this transition to commercial budget reduction, going to new providers. It's more risk, right? They're not proven yet, whether it's us or others. And so it's really important that there is an alternative, that we don't end up with a gap, and Europe might have second thoughts about what has occurred at the time, because there's no choice. There's no new US platform that we can collaborate on. So I think it's motivation to make sure that we continue the international partnership, and it's motivation to make sure there is absolutely no gap and an overlap between the ISS retirement and the only or the or two maybe commercial space station that will be out there. So,
Mike, any thoughts? Or no?
I would echo what Max said pretty much. I think the Chinese station and the Chinese space program is a huge motivator in the US. And, we've all sort of said it under our breath, but there is another space race going on. It's been labeled Space Race 2.0 in the US. It's ironic that I'm saying this after I mentioned that the ISS is such a beacon of international collaboration, but that's how it's being viewed. And I think that it will spur the US government, at least, to fund programs that they think will keep Western leadership in low Earth orbit and beyond.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead.
And maybe just one thing is that things change, right? There was one point in time where cooperation between the US and Russia, it was unthinkable. And yet it happened. And now it's becoming difficult again, right? it goes, it comes and goes. So today we're thinking, China unthinkable, but who knows what's going to happen in the future? And that's why I like the no gap approach, and that's something that we might want to tackle at some point, which is also interoperability and those standards that are going to make those stations and those vehicles interoperable in the future. That's hugely important, and it should be slept on because it's going to put us in either in a very bad or in a very good position in the future.
It's a great point. Roberto, go ahead.
I'd like to add one point. I think as Europe, we should look at what India and China are doing in looking at the possibility to have their own systems. US have already cargo, crew, and infrastructures. We in Europe miss of one big piece of this chain, the crew transportation. I think, and this is what India is developing, China has developed, US has, Russia has, and now I think it's also time for Europe to consider this, to go and develop a European own transportation system.
A vibrant global marketplace. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Let's hope there's no tariffs involved.
In terms of barter also, that could also help.
Okay. And you make me think, at the beginning of my career, 30 years ago, I was in Moscow helping negotiate a launch agreement with the Russian Space Agency, newly formed Roscosmos, and this idea of bringing the Russians into the ISS, formerly known as Space Station Freedom. This was really the kernel of the idea at the time. So it was something very improbable to me as a child of the Cold War to see that happen, but you're exactly right. We were able to shift and bring them in. And I know a lot of people have said, well, it shows, because it fell apart with the war in Ukraine, but really it lasted for 30 years. I mean, this is something incredible. In human history, 30 years is a long time, and particularly in space, it's a very, very long time. So, yeah, kind of amazing. Yeah. I got this question from the floor. I want to throw it to the open for all the panel, but they said, what's the biggest challenge for a space station? Is it financial? Is it technical? Is it legal? If you're operating a new space station, what's the biggest thing? What keeps you up at night? What do you think about? How does that go? Who would like to start? Max, you want to try?
I mean, firstly, in our business, safety is number one. I don't think, if any of us as commercial operator have a safety issue, that we'll be in business. And so taking the legacy and the heritage that NASA started, and then we already have a success of transitioning to commercial with the safe Dragon spacecraft, right? Where we went from a space shuttle to Dragon. We've reduced, the United States, reduced materially the cost of a flight to orbit. And we've proven that it can be safe while being low cost. The next big hurdle is being low cost and moving fast. We are not right now innovating, new life support system. We are not doing fundamentally new technologies. We actually are trying to do what the ISS is, with a really advanced life support system over steps, but we're trying to do it much cheaper, right? 10 times, maybe 100 times cheaper eventually. I think that's the biggest challenge, so that we can have similar services or comparable services without the cost to the taxpayer, and while being able to be profitable while these new business models are being unlocked. Now, to do it all, you need an amazing team, and it's all about hiring incredible engineers that can move fast, lower the costs, and build safe systems. And so that has been, without that, you have no shot, basically, right? You can have the best strategy. If you don't have the best engineers, you won't succeed. So these three elements for us is a difficulty, and then we have to prove it on orbit. So that will be the proof in the pudding, basically.
Thanks. Sebastian, you have a comment?
For us, I would say in Europe, the first question is, and I agree with Roberto, is a question of autonomy, in fact. It's a time for us, because this is the end of the ISS, this is the end of area, kind of make operation, to decide what we want to do in space. We want to be autonomous, but it's cost a lot. And from the time being, we have perhaps other things to have in consideration. So first, it's the main question we have to answer. And as you know, at the end of this year, the Ministerial Council at the ESA level, and I think it's the right moment for us to to decide what we want to do really in the
I think
future.
back in the day, there was the Hermes space plane was supposed to fly on top of the Ariane 5, yeah, and then it was decided that it was difficult from a budget standpoint, I think, yeah, to maintain. So,
And that's actually a great segue because I think the Hermes space plane, it was a bit late, it was a bit over budget, but I want to say just like every space project in the world. What actually killed it to some extent, or what can be considered to have killed it, is the reunification of Germany. Like Germany suddenly needed the money, right, to bring the standards of the eastern part back up to par with the western part. And so they had to do a very hard exercise of looking at all their budgets and then canceling a ton of stuff to focus on their priorities, and so they pulled out of the Hermes space plane, and then suddenly it was very hard to sustain with the countries remaining. So great segue, because I was going to say, to me, I've never built a space station, so maybe I'm a bit bold, but I don't think the technical aspect is the difficulty. We always manage somehow, when I'm saying we, tip of the hat to all the engineers and all the teams, but they always manage to solve the problems, right? Always. If you look at the ISS, it's amazing what this spaceship is. We take it for granted, but it's absolutely unbelievable that it operates every day. It's been operating every day for so long, so many people involved all across the world. So we solve the technical challenges always. It's not that easy. Again, not taking anything for granted, but we find a way. People find a way. But the political will and all that stuff is sometimes difficult. We've been talking about Europe uniting. We're trying to have our own vehicle, but it's not that easy because we have to, somehow ask all the different countries what they want, and it's hard to all agree on what we want. We talked about those barter elements internationally. We talked about all those things. So that's to me the most difficult thing. When there's a will, there's a way. It sounds very simple, but if you look at what India is doing, that's what they're doing. There's a very strong will, and there's a very clear goal, and everybody's aligned, and everybody's pushing in the same direction. So when you have this, then I don't want to say it's easy, it's very difficult, but you can focus on the technical problems. And if you do focus on the technical problems with enough will, enough budget, enough resources, then you'll solve them. So I agree with Sébastien, we're at the crossroads right now in Europe. Maybe it's time for us to step up. We have a ton of projects. We have a cargo vehicle, that we'd like to develop. Maybe it's going to turn into a crew vehicle. I certainly hope so. And we'll see what happens. But it all starts with the political will, and only then comes the technical element.
Roberto, Dr. Singh, Max mentioned safety as the #1 priority. Do you agree? Is this the biggest hurdle?
Correct. I think Thomas correctly said that we have a very strong political will to take it forward. And of course, as an agency perspective, we do have the technical challenges, long gestation time, availability of expertise in industries to support such a huge project. These are some of the challenges, but they are getting solved. And one more problem with the agencies are generally there is a huge upfront cost. And you also have to answer to rest of the nation that what in return with that upfront cost is coming. So that is one of the challenges generally every agency faces. But given that we have large researcher base, and they are looking forward for such a platform for their research ideas to be tested, we are able to justify that this kind of upfront cost will definitely bring a lot of return to the researchers and the progress of India.
Roberto?
The tough thing is that business cost, technical safety, and legal cannot be tackled individually. They are linked, and they have impact on each other. For the study we are running with ESA for shaping the future after the ISS, we are struggling with, for instance, with the insurance and legal aspects as a private company. Of course, and also for the cargo resupply mission, we are working with the companies for insurance of the mission. That's quite hard. At least in Europe, it is hard to find someone who wants to insure the mission, not just the launch, the whole mission. I mean, And then I think on this topic, we need help from the agencies. And in the ISS, we have a sort of umbrella, the Intergovernmental Agreement and cross-waiver of liabilities. If we go and serve ISS or a private station, what happens if there is some accident? That is something that we are working. At the moment, we haven't yet a good solution, but I think this is another topic we have to solve before entering really in a commercial market.
Mike, how does that work for when you guys have done these Axiom missions? You're flying, and then you're under this liability and cross-waiver regime when you're attached. How does it work?
Exactly. So we fly under the auspices of the ISS, so we have to agree to all the agreements, including the crew code of conduct and the cross waivers of liability, et cetera. So we are in that umbrella. However, I agree completely with Roberto. This is a brand new area when we talk about a purely private space station that has not been figured out yet. There's steps being taken in that direction, but it's not done. And then to comment on a couple of the other thoughts that the panelists have had, I agree that safety, I mean, it can't be anything but number one. How we get there technically, this is why we went to Tazi, who has all of the experience building something like 40% of the pressurized volume on the ISS today as our provider of the shell. So you could say the technology is there, and so that is not a huge hurdle, but what goes inside is a little bit different. If you look at the ISS today, as you mentioned in your open, it's as big as a football field. Most of it's outside, and that's because the components are enormous. You know, we've seen these batteries and these pumps that are external on the truss that weigh 2-3 times as much as a human. Well, all that needs to be miniaturized and put inside. It doesn't have to be, but that's the way at least Axiom is approaching it. And so that technology is, it's moving along, but the software to control that stuff, there's definitely some work that we also have very intelligent engineers that are working very hard on. And then I think the thing that has been mentioned very much is the financial piece. You mentioned COTS, the commercial transportation system, and then the cargo services contracts, and then commercial crew. All of those had a fairly large fraction paid for by the government. You've seen that fraction decline over time, and so what we see, at least in the CLD services that we anticipate, is that fraction of development money is going to be a lot less, which means it's up to the companies to raise it through investment or some other kind of revenue source. So the financial piece of it is very important and can't be ignored.
Another question from I'm going to take the safety one step further. I had a question from the floor about orbital debris. So I know with ESA, there's a policy with respect that French space law talks about orbital debris. Are we concerned with BAS, with the commercial space stations about we have now over 10,000 active satellites, almost 11,000 active satellites in orbit, which, by the way, is something extraordinary. When I was running the Satellite Industry Association, we had something like 400 or 500, and now we have well over 10,000 now. And many of them flying in inclined low Earth orbit. So how do you guys think about orbital debris?
Well, you probably know the ISS is shielded against debris penetrations. I think those 10,000 plus satellites are not the biggest concern. It's more the stuff you can't see. And so you've got to decide, the frequency of a particle hitting you is inversely proportional to its size. And so at some point you draw a line, you say, okay, anything below this size, which I can't see and I can't avoid, I have to protect against. So of course, shielding is going to be a part of any space station, whether it's public or private.
I'd say, I think, I'm looking at Mike, but the ISS sometimes, does a debris avoidance maneuver, but it's not that often. I think it's a few times in the last 10, 15 years. And on that topic, I'd like to play the devil's advocate a little bit. I'm not saying space debris is not important, but sometimes I think it's been a bit exaggerated. There's a lot of stuff out there, but there's also a lot of room. The best way to deal with it is not to create any more debris. I mean, deorbiting, catching stuff, it's the relative speed of several times a rifle bullet, right? How do you catch one? You're intersecting orbits, it's almost impossible. It's very, 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 very difficult. So not creating debris does 99% of the job, I would say, and then it's gonna eventually come back down. So that's the first thing we need to tackle. And then sometimes there's misconception out there because they say space pollution, which to me sounds a little bit strange. It's an inert environment with inert pieces in it. We're not polluting a river, throwing engine oil into a nice little clean river. So just putting things back in perspective. I think step number one is not creating too many new debris. And then obviously, like Mike was explaining, how dealing with what's out there. But sometimes I see it a little bit exaggerated out there in the press with that cloud, of debris that's surrounding the Earth. If you look at that picture in the newspaper, like every debris at the scale of the picture is as big as a region, right? Because that's how you show them on the picture, right? Otherwise, they're invisible because they're only 2 centimeters, 1 inch large. Well, except on that picture, they look like they're 400 kilometers large at the scale of the Earth. So that cloud surrounding the Earth that seems like you have to navigate and avoid every time you go to space, is not really the situation that we're encountering. I'm not trying to minimize the problem. I'm not saying we shouldn't deal with it, but I'm saying there's a lot of misconceptions out there. And we, as an agency, I think we need to be scientifically accurate when we depict that problem.
It's like when you're camping, they have this rule, pack it in, pack it out, right?
Yeah,
if
absolutely.
you're bringing it, you should leave the campsite a better place.
Yeah, don't litter.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, Max?
I mean, I'm really excited to hear Thomas talk about the misconception of the orbital debris visualization. Another way to think about it, if you take one of these plane app and you zoom out, it's about the same. The planes are represented at a crazy scale, and you can't see, any sky. Basically, it would tell you that if you just the planes that are up there, I think there are more. There's millions around the Earth, and I can still see the sky, right? And they're much closer and much bigger than satellite. In terms of what Mike mentioned, obviously all space stations have to protect using Whipple shield for small debris that we cannot avoid or control or detect. So we are all doing that. And one of the issues is that we are limited by the orbits we can consider because of debris and because of radiation too. So for example, for Haven 1, we were really hoping to go 500 kilometers or something a little bit above what the peak of the ISS is. But MMOD, micrometeorite concerns, and as well as radiation a bit higher, kind of limit us to be lower, which is more expensive because we need to reboost and we have more drag. So we'd certainly wish there was a lot less debris, and fully agree with we certainly can't make it worse, and we have to pack in and pack out in the future and not leave object or destruct object there.
Dr. Singh?
See, for the space station, means our BAS, we do have the same concept of Whipple shield. It is protected, though Thomas is telling that it is exaggerated. But given the safety has to be to the highest standard, we cannot take the chance. So you have to reduce the probability of debris collision to very minimal. However, there are designs where you can isolate the module and go to other module if at all such thing happens. Coming to our commitment to no debris. So we are part of IADC, and India is fully committed to follow all the norms which will not lead any space debris out of any of our space mission.
And these are all voluntary, yeah?
Yes.
I don't know if you want to comment from Kness. I know you have it in French space law. It's
Nothing special, but I think for the orbit, considering for space station orbit, in fact, debris is not a real problem because there are a lot of traffic at this orbit. So, with a chilling station is perhaps enough to prevent accident. But for the other orbit, and especially for GPS or for observation, even if it can be exaggerated in some newspaper, I agree, but we have to manage it because it can be a problem. This is a shared room for everybody, so we have no right to pollute, and we have to take care of the space, even if there are a lot of room. So this is a concern.
Okay, I'm going to combine a question I have here with one of my other questions. Roberto, do you have it? So,
I think I never say it's not a concern, but I think it's two different things. Pollution on the one hand, which relates to life, right? That's what pollution does. And then crowding the orbits without a legal framework is something different, right? To me, those are two different things in a way. And debris or active satellites also is is two different branches of that equation. But I think it also comes down to not crowding the orbits, but that requires a legal framework, and then taking care of the end of life of your assets, which also requires a legal framework because it doesn't exist right now. Some agencies are trying, CNES is trying, ESA is trying. We give ourselves the mandate to deal with the end of life, but there's no legal obligation, and other players across the world don't give themselves the same legal obligation. So that's going to become a problem eventually. I agree, 100%.
So I know you guys spend a lot of time when you're in orbit maintaining the space station, operating the space station. This is a considerable amount of your time. One of the questions I had from the floor and we had here is, are there ways with these new modern platforms, using AI, using autonomy, other systems, putting, Mike, I think you mentioned, instead of putting the batteries on the outside where you can't get to them or you have to do a spacewalk, you put it on the inside where you can maintain it. Do you have any comment on what that looks like? How do you reduce the need for operational maintenance continually, and so you can do more experiments?
I think it's on the space station is roundabout. It used to be almost more than 50% of the time when the crew size was 3 to 4, 5, 6. Now it's down to maybe 30% of the time because we have bigger crews, so there's more time for research and science. But it's still a huge chunk of time that the astronauts are spending just maintaining the space station and systems in general, preventive maintenance, corrective maintenance, testing the water system, changing filters, you name it, cleaning stuff. And ideally, if you can minimize that time, then the return gets inversely proportional. So that's a big, big deal. Even 1 hour every day of astronaut time is valued at, I don't know how much, but it's quite a number. And the science returns maybe unlock some new possibilities, etc. So I think all the smart ways that Mike was mentioning, easier access, easier system, more automated systems is something very nice. As for AI, I struggle to envision how that would really help at scale. We've had Robonaut on the space station. It's not exactly the same, but it was this automated, robot that was supposed to kind of test the concept of taking care of repetitive actions instead of the astronauts and gain some time. It never really worked out, I think it's fair to say. Also because the station is such a mess right now, organized mess, but still there's plenty of stuff. And so there's always a cable in the way. There's always something that protrudes a little bit. There's always something that's not exactly where it's supposed to be. There's always something unexpected, even on the inside. And unfortunately, up to now, with the current technology, then that would stop the robot in its track. But for an astronaut, you would just push the cable 1 inch to the left and it would be perfectly fine and it would take 1 second. But for the robot, that you would stop and then you would have to investigate, reboot, etc., etc. So it didn't really pan out on the space station. But this being said, the technology is evolving. Like nowadays, we have much better automation systems. In the future, one can only imagine what there's going to be. So I think the upside is tremendous. But for now, in the present, it didn't really materialize.
Mike?
Yeah, so I think to pull a little bit on what Thomas says, there are a few things that we can do. I wouldn't say quite artificial intelligence. It's just using computers to help us do the job better. So I've flown on different vehicles from the Soyuz to the shuttle to the space station to Dragon, and each of those represent sort of a level of technology that's better. And the Dragon, I hate to admit it, is pretty much hands-off. I mean, it'll detect a failure, something called failure detection, isolation, and recovery. It does pretty much automatically. Where in the shuttle, we were throwing switches left and right to try to keep up with things. So I think the point is that we need to think about making these stations evolvable to keep pace with these things. So you can't just throw, and the Soyuz has done that to some degree. It launched in '67. It was very primitive, and they put layers of technology over it. But it's a bit like a lot of coats of paint on something. It starts to look pretty lousy after a while. So you've got to make the station evolvable with new software to be able to continuously update it. I think the only reapplication for AI might be on the ground system. So today we have an enormous team maintaining the space station from the ground, the flight controllers. Every person that you see in that room in mission control has somebody behind them in another room, maybe 2 people, analyzing data. All that stuff can be done much better by a machine. And you can probably use a little bit of artificial intelligence to detect trends and tweak settings to make it be less humans involved, which is obviously the end result we're looking for.
Yeah, in terms of the maintenance aspect, our approach has been to, the ISS, every module is a different function. There's, power generation module and laboratory module. Our approach is actually to create a platform where all the module in our Haven 2 space station have all the capabilities. They have communication, avionics, they have batteries, propulsion, and the outfitting is different. So this gives us a lot of duplicate parts that we can exchange. We also try to do the same, put as much inside that is serviceable by the crew without EVA there. And then in the worst case scenario, we will be in a position to deorbit a module, without losing the whole station operation. Today there are some modules on the ISS that if you really lost the module, you would have to probably abandon the ISS. In terms of AI, I think it's hard to bet against AI. Probably everything that's been done on the ISS is not benefiting from what's happening right now. And I wouldn't bet against, humanoid robot, general purpose humanoid robot being able to do incredible things sooner than we think. And I think that could change human spaceflight, or that could, make it accelerate. So we'll see what's there and what comes. Also, our engineers today are not yet using AI to design subsystems, to design CMGs, to design primary structure. And I don't know exactly when it will come, but I think it will come fast, where computer engineering with AI will be also a big change for us at some point.
Roberto, did you have a point?
Very few things to add. First of all, for AI, I agree with what Mike just said. It is important for ground control and maintenance. We are running an experiment. We are rerunning the telemetry data and try to understand if we could have identified failures in advance, knowing the model. And it's, we are doing it now. So we are learning how to do it, but it's quite interesting. We believe that could be a clever way to use AI. On robotics, I agree with what Thomas you said. It's somehow messy environment, organized messy environment, and we are trying to learn how pharmaceutical labs are working. Those labs are much less messy than a station, and so we have to understand how to cope with the robotics and I would say interfaces that will be important in order to optimize the internal robotics on the commercial stations.
And I think that would put a stone in what Sebastian was saying in his idea of having dedicated spaces, right? If you could have like a man-tended free flyer or a dedicated module in which you would do those activities in an automated way, you can maintain those areas very clean, very operable, and then you would transfer the mess and the rest of of everything where the reaction is needed in a different volume. That would be actually very smart to do those things on the same vehicle.
Okay. Well, I wish. Oh, you want to go? No. I think we're out of time. It's okay. I apologize. So we're getting the hook. When Christian comes on stage, I know that my time is limited. Let me just say thank you. I wish we could continue this conversation for another hour. I think it's fascinating. But let me thank you for your time, your insights, your leadership. I think what we've heard today here is it's both bold and well-grounded. This was really fantastic remarks. So please join me in thanking the panelists. Let me just reflect to say, I think what we've learned here, that this isn't a race per se, maybe more of a relay. If it was a kind of race, it's more of a relay race where we're passing the baton from one space station to another, where we're improving as we go, from government to industry, from legacy platforms to the new ventures, from exploration to a sustained presence in orbit. And so thank you guys for all you're doing to make this a reality. It's very exciting. As I like to say, this is the most exciting time in space that I've ever experienced in my 32 years working in this business. So it's great to be alive. It's great to be here. The future is now. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Clay, for the excellent moderation, and a big applause to our panelists. I mean, this was a fascinating panel. And I would like to ask you also to line up in front maybe for a group picture. So while the photographers are doing their thing here with the group picture, I would like to inform you that we are breaking now for a tea and coffee break. And we will continue in this room with the first of today's Global Networking GNF sessions that will again welcome back Michael Lopez Alegria to talk about the Axiom 4 mission. But I also want to stress that at 11 all the technical sessions will start. So if you are interested and engaged with technical sessions, please do find your rooms in time. Other than that, please be back in time. The latest at 11 o'clock will kick off here again. Thank you. everybody. If you could please take a seat as we proceed after this coffee break with our next GNF session, which will be an exciting one. But before introducing the speaker of this GNF session, I would like to draw your attention to the fact that you are able to ask your most burning questions through our Slido system. You will see the slide up here behind me in a second. Scan the code, ask your question. This is a very good opportunity, this session, because you will have one of the most experienced, if not the most experienced astronaut giving this talk. And I'm very pleased to welcome back on stage again, Michael Lopez Alegria. Take your time for autographs. And he will speak about the upcoming Axiom 4 mission under the title Building on the Legacy of Human Spaceflight. This is organized by Axiom Space, and I'm very pleased to welcome on stage Michael Lopez Alegria, Chief Astronaut of Axiom Space. Welcome, Michael.
Hello, everybody. Good still morning, I guess. It's a pleasure to be here, and thank you, Christian, for that warm introduction. I've been coming to IAC many years, but this is my first GLEX, and I congratulate the local organizers as well, of course, the IAF, for what they've put together so far. So let me get started. I am going to talk about private astronaut missions, but I want to begin talking about a couple of other things that Axiom Space is doing. Really, we have 3 main areas of focus. The first is our commercial space station. And what you see here is the launch sequence of our 5 modules. Now, we've changed this recently. Originally, we were going to launch 4 of those modules to dock to the ISS. So we have an agreement with NASA that allows us to actually attach a module there, which is quite advantageous because instead of having to put everything in the first module, we can sort of take some, I'll call them utilities from the ISS, namely power, electrical power, and thermal rejection, so cooling. So the idea was we were going to launch what you see here is HAB 1, followed by HAB 2, followed by the research and manufacturing facility, which was the last one. And then the 4th one was going to be the PTM. Now you see here it says PPTM, and I'll explain that change. PTM was power and thermal module. So as I mentioned, we would be taking some resources from the ISS originally with those other 3 modules, and then when the power and thermal module came, it would provide its own organic, and then we would separate and become a fully functional, independent, free-floating private space station. Because of the sort of accelerated timeline to get the ISS to be able to prepare it to deorbit, we've changed that in conjunction with NASA, and we are now launching the first module called the PPTM. The P stands for Payloads Power Thermal Module, and it's going to be berthed to the ISS, and the advantage that that provides is the berthing port is a little bit larger than the docking port. It will allow us to transfer some payload racks and things like that into the payload thermal module. At the same time, we will send the HAB module into an orbit independently and then attach the PPTM, and that will attach to the HAB module, and then at that point, we'll have a fully functioning free-floating private space station. So we're going to achieve that capability a bit earlier. The second thing we're doing is developing the next generation spacesuit. So you have a contract with NASA to build this spacesuit, which will be worn by astronauts when they step on the moon in the Artemis program. This is a contract that we won in competition with another company. That company won the contract to build an orbital spacesuit, so basically one that would replace the extravehicular mobility unit, the spacesuit, that's being used today on the space shuttle, on the space station. I said space shuttle because it was designed and built to be used on the space shuttle, which made certain things part of its normal routine, which are not true today. So back in the 80s, 90s, and early aughts, the space shuttle would go to orbit. It would stay up there for 10 days, let's say, come back, and that allowed the suit to be refurbished on land by expert technicians. Well, that stopped when the shuttle went away, so the suits are now staying on the space station for months, if not years at a time, and that maintenance has to be done by the crews, and it wasn't designed for that. So our suit and both of the lunar, I mentioned that Collins won the orbital suit replacement. They since decided to withdraw, so now we're doing both suits. It's really the same suit, has different shoes. One you walk on the moon, the other one you float in space, but primarily it's the same. And some of the things that are really different about it are, again, this ability to do maintenance on orbit with evolvable, what we call ORUs, orbital replacement units. So basically you can take a part out, put a place in, put one back in its place, and it's much simpler design. It has some other capabilities that are quite unique. It has variable pressure, so all the suits so far have been a single operating pressure, generally about 1/3 of an atmosphere. The reason you like the idea of having a higher pressure available to you is the higher the pressure, the less time the astronaut has to spend preparing to go outside, meaning that we have to rid our bodies of nitrogen to avoid decompression sickness. But the higher the pressure, the less that requirement becomes. So you can imagine where you would go, start the spacewalk at a fairly high pressure, and then since you're breathing 100% oxygen in this pressurized environment, you could slowly reduce the pressure. The advantage of a lower pressure is the suit is more mobile. So those are the two other main activities, but the third one, and the one I want to focus on, is private astronaut missions. So here you see the 4 missions that we've flown so far. The idea of a private astronaut mission was initiated by NASA in 2019, and we are an American company, so NASA is our gateway, if you will, to the ISS. They announced this initiative in 2019. They said at the time they were considering up to 2 missions per year. Turns out it's really more like 1, and all of our access to the ISS is sort of regulated, if you will, by NASA. We won the right to do these missions via a competitive process, and as you can see, we won the first 4 of those competitions. There are 2 more missions being competed literally as we speak, and we hope to win the same as well. So let me go in some detail about some of these missions. The first thing I'd like to say, as you can see, there are 12 people that have flown or will have flown. The first mission occurred in 2022, the second 2023, the third in 2024, and the fourth is going to happen within the next month or so, currently scheduled for May 29th. Of those 12 people that flown, 2 of them are repeat flyers. I was the commander on AX-1 and AX-3, and then Peggy Whitson on AX-2 and will be the commander on AX-4. But other than that, we represent 11 different nationalities, and the idea here is that we're expanding access to a lot of entities, nations, individuals, researchers that would not normally have access to the ISS. So that is one reason that we do these private astronaut missions. The second one, as a company, we want to be able to exercise procedures, communications, the types of things that you need to be able to run a space mission. So this is all with an eye toward the space station that we plan to launch, as I mentioned, in the next few years. So this coordination, basically we want to build a team, the organization, and the procedures that we would use in order to do a space mission on the future Axiom space station, but we're doing it now on the ISS. So AX-4, which is what I want to highlight a little bit, is the first time that these 3 countries, which are India, Poland, and Hungary, will fly an astronaut in over 40 years. It will be the second flight for each of those countries, and obviously the first to the International Space Station. So the crew, I'd like to point out, I mentioned Peggy Whitson. She's a very decorated astronaut, has spent more time in space than any American so far. She commanded AX-2 and previously served on 3 different expeditions on the ISS, 2 of them as commander. The pilot is Shubhanshu Shukla from India, group captain. We call him Shuks, that's his call sign. Aviators and astronauts have nicknames. His is Shuks. From Poland, we have Slavoj Wisniewski. Slavoj, sorry, I have to cheat here, Wisniewski. He just got married and hyphenated his name, so as if it weren't complicated enough. His call sign is Suave. And then from Hungary, Tibor Kapu, we call him Tibor. He doesn't have a nickname. Anyway, why is it interesting for countries to fly in space? A couple of things are true for any country. It obviously brings a lot of prestige. It's a great source of inspiration to the youth in that country. It is a chance for that country to perform its own organic science investigations on the orbital laboratory. And then for India in particular, it serves a couple of other purposes. Shooks and I and many other astronauts are test pilots, and in test pilot world, we have what we call the build-up approach. So you don't go get the most dangerous test point in a flight on the first time you fly the airplane. You go gradually, step by step. And this is a very fortuitous and profitable learning point for India as it gets ready for Gaganyaan. Similarly, for its researchers to be able to practice the ways that they will interact with the crew on orbit and with the mission control team, that they can get ready for Gaganyaan and, of course, the follow-on space station. So the AX4 is going to do 60 science activities, which is by far a record, representing 31 countries. So obviously, India, Hungary, and Poland are among those, but also the UAE, Brazil, Nigeria, Saudi Arabia, and countries all across Europe will be represented. It'll also be the second human spaceflight mission, human spaceflight commercial mission for ESA. The first was Marcus Want, a Swede who flew on AX3 with me. And thanks to this change in the Indian space policy in 2023, it has allowed ISRO to collaborate with commercial companies to further their objectives. And as I said, it serves as a big point to help them prepare in some ways for Gaganyaan. These missions all have a similar profile. We launch on a Crew Dragon. It depends on the phasing to get to the ISS. Then we spend 10 days, or in these last two missions, 14 days aboard, and then we come home. So now I want to talk a little bit more specifically about the two missions that I have experience with, AX1 and AX2, and sort of talk you through some of the training that we went through to get there. So I would say the training in general consists of three different kinds. There's about 40% is training at NASA, how to live and work on the International Space Station. About 40% training at SpaceX, how to live and work on the Crew Dragon to get to the ISS and back. And then 20% I'm going to call miscellaneous. And this is miscellaneous training. This is one of the very first things that we like to do as crews, because we don't know each other. Unlike a NASA mission where we've been in the astronaut office for years at a time before we get assigned to a mission, we were complete strangers. In fact, this is the AX1 crew: Larry Connor, American; Mark Pathy, a Canadian; and Eitan Shtibe, an Israeli. And the first time we met, almost literally, was the mountains of Alaska in the Talkeetna Range. Now, this is through an organization called the National Outdoor Leadership School. And we spend about a week in the field. You can see we have pretty big packs, and that means that we're not on survival. In other words, we don't have to find our food or eat plants or kill animals. We bring all our food with us, but it's pretty miserable. And the concept here is bonding through suffering. And I can tell you that on this particular mission, we suffered. It was in June, but it seemed like winter. It rained, it snowed, it sleeted, it hailed. It had every kind of precipitation you could possibly imagine. For AX3, on the other hand, we had a different experience. We went kayaking in the Pacific Northwest of the United States, and usually the weather up there is pretty miserable, rainy and wet. We had a week of glorious sunshine. So even though it was not quite as miserable, it also served the purpose of bonding. The next thing we did is we do some parabolic flight. So a flight where the aircraft does parabolas. The airplane goes nose down, then pulls up to about 45 degrees nose up or so, and then pushes over the top. And as a result, you get about 20 to 25 seconds of microgravity. It's a lot of fun until you come back down from that, and then you feel about 2 Gs at the bottom, and then you repeat that over and over. But And it's not really a test or anything, it's just an exposure to what it's like to feel weightless. Then we go from microgravity to macrogravity. So this is a centrifuge, a commercial centrifuge operator in Philadelphia. And the sort of squarish looking silver box at the end of that arm is a cab that feels like a cockpit of an airplane, or in our case, a spacecraft. And the centrifuge is meant to expose us to the G-forces that we would feel during the launch, during the entry. And here I have overlaid the G-profile of the Falcon 9 with a Dragon capsule on top. May be difficult to read the units, but on the left, those are meters per second squared. Basically, divide by 10, and that's the number of Gs. So you can see the first stage goes up to about 3 Gs, and then you can see some sawtooth there. That is the engines throttling back so as not to exceed the maximum Gs. Then the first stage engines stop, they separate, and then you see the second stage lights, actually less than 1 G at the very beginning, and you see how it creeps up to a little bit over 4, almost 5 Gs until second stage engine cutoff. Okay, and then we spend a bunch of time at NASA, and we do most of this work inside the Space Vehicle Mock-up facility. So it's a full-size mock-up of all of the modules of the ISS. They're not laid out exactly the same because we can't have modules going up and down, but they're all laid out in a horizontal plane. And again, our objective here is to learn how to live and work in space. So living, certainly how you sleep, how you eat, how you use the toilet, obviously very important. But more importantly, what to do in case of an emergency. Emergencies in spacecraft generally fall into 2 categories: depressurization, i.e. a leak, or a fire. Both are pretty bad. We spend a lot of time practicing the procedures and what to do. As you can see here, we also get some photography training and some medical training in case one of us has a medical problem. The rest of the crew has to learn how to take care of them. Now we go to SpaceX. SpaceX training is similar, how to live and work. There's a little bit less room to move around, so the eating and the sleeping arrangements are a little more primitive. But by and large, it's how we interface with the vehicle, both in routine operations, as in liftoff, ascent, and return, rendezvous and docking, and undocking, et cetera. Spacecraft is incredibly beautiful inside. It's very clean. I've had the privilege of flying on really 4 different spacecraft, and the first one was a Soyuz, and the last one was a Dragon, and it's a bit like the difference between a Lada and a Tesla, if you know what a Lada looks like. Pretty nice on the inside. The crew also spend a lot of time focused on fire and depress as those kinds of emergencies. Most of the operations of the Dragon, certainly during ascent and reentry, are just the 2 center people, the pilot and the commander. But the rest of the crew obviously has to be trained on what to do in case of a problem. So this training takes about 10 months to get from the time we start, that picture in the National Outdoor Leadership School, until we're ready to fly. And about 2 weeks before liftoff, we all go to see our very Dragon capsule. Obviously, the other work that we have done with SpaceX has been in a simulator. But this is difficult to see, but in the background underneath the blue scaffolding and some plastic wrap is our capsule. And we got in our flight suits and got in our capsule and went sort of through how the vehicle sounds, some of the peculiarities, smell the new car smell, that kind of thing. And then we go into quarantine, 2-week period of quarantine. NASA has what they call health stabilization program. Obviously, the idea is we don't want any unwanted crew members to go to the ISS with us. So we're in isolation. We have our food prepared by people who are living in the quarantine facility with us. In the meantime, the vehicle is being assembled. So the capsule is attached to the rocket in a facility that's nearby. This is all done horizontally. It goes out on sort of a rail car and it gets erected into the vertical position. And on L-2, 2 days prior to launch, the crew goes through the routine they will go through on launch day. So we wake up at the same time, we have breakfast, we go to the suit up room, we get suited up, we walk out the door at a specific time, We get in the cars, the Teslas that take us to the launch pad. We get strapped in. We go through the whole countdown procedure as if it were launch day, but when we get to T-minus 0 seconds, nothing happens. It's a little bit more serious on launch day, same kind of routine, but a really different outcome. Ascent in the Falcon 9, Crew Dragon with a Falcon 9 booster is quite exciting. It's very smooth, unlike the shuttle, which is very sudden, a liftoff and a lot of vibration, a lot of noise. This is very gradual, but the acceleration, as you saw from that previous chart, is pretty dynamic. It all feels like pure unidirectional, like you're on a chair on a train track and there's something pushing you faster and faster and faster, and you just can't believe how fast you're going. How fast are we going? 28,000 kilometers per hour is what we get to in about 9 minutes. And we're inserted at an orbital altitude of 200 kilometers. The space station is at about 400 kilometers. And then we spend a certain amount of time, and it depends on a lot of factors. Let me just say that the orbit of the space station is basically a plane that goes through the center of the Earth, but the Earth is rotating underneath it. So we have to launch at the exact second that that plane crosses through the launch site, in our case, Cape Canaveral in Florida. And at that point, the space station could be directly overhead or it could be on the other side of the orbit. And that distance makes up what we call the phasing time that takes us to get from liftoff to docking. Eventually, we get within visual sight of the ISS. Obviously, this is us taken from the ISS looking back down. And we make our way to the docking ports. Now, docking port, there are two of them. One is on top of the space station, as is this picture, and the other one is on what I would call the front of the space station. In either case, we come up from behind, we go in front, always looking at the space station, and then either continue on the docking axis or continue around to zenith and come down on the docking axis. There's obviously a vestibule between our hatch and the ISS hatch. We fill that with air. We wait a while. We make sure that it's not leaking. Then we open up both hatches and come aboard the ISS. So this is AX-1 crew visiting Expedition 67, which was on board at the time. And this is the AX-3 crew, just a little over a year ago, visiting the Expedition 71 crew. And then we get a lot of briefings about what to do in case of emergency. Here's where the fire extinguisher is. Here's your muster point when it's over. And then we get to work doing science. So as I said, these look a lot like a NASA or ESA mission. We're doing mostly science experiments, quite a bit of outreach actually, reaching out to school children on the ground, dignitaries, news programs, whatever the country customer wants. And then we do, and the rest of it is just living and working on the ISS. So here's some imagery of some of the things. You see Larry Connor, the first on AX-1 in the upper left-hand corner with his hands in what's called the glove box. The same, those are the hands of somebody else on the upper right. We did the first 3D hologram from space on the lower right, and then the lower left is a technology experiment to put these magnetic floating discs that sort of self-assembled. And just a few more images from AX-3. So as I said, somewhere between 10 days to 14 days on the ISS. In the case of AX-1, we were extended for 5 days, I want to say, due to weather. And for AX-3, we were extended 3 days. So we got a few extra days in space, which is never a bad thing. But at some point, it's time to come home. So the pilot and the commander usually put their spacesuits on in the ISS, while, as you see, the two mission specialists here are ready. They have their undergarments on, but they're going to do their donning of the spacesuit inside the spacecraft. And then again, the phasing is very similar from the time we undock to the splashdown. Can be anywhere from a matter of 4 hours or so to up to, in our case, 48 hours on the last mission, which is a long time to spend in Dragon. But re-entry, once you fire the engines, it all happens pretty fast. You go from 28,000 kilometers an hour to 27,900 or something. It's a very small delta V that it takes. But what that does is that the low point of your orbit, the perigee, is now in the Earth's atmosphere. And as soon as it's in the atmosphere, obviously the drag forces start to decelerate you faster and faster. Obviously, all that speed turns into heat, so the bottom of the capsule is red hot. We can see plasma floating up through the couple of windows, which is pretty exciting. It's fairly smooth, a little bit of vibration. G-forces, again, we've experienced them in centrifuge, so that feels pretty comfortable. And then you're back to basically 0G as you're free falling until the parachute's open. Parachute opening sequence is quite dynamic. First some drogue chutes, then some main chutes, which each of them have stages of opening because you don't want to shock the G, increase the G very suddenly. And then it's a pretty, oh, I got ahead of myself. This is the undocking, and here is the splashdown. In both cases on my flights, we landed in the Atlantic Ocean off the coast of Florida. Before you know it, the rescue forces Is it dark for you as well? There we go. The rescue forces are coming with the apparatus to take the capsule. And basically the way it works is there's a recovery ship that's operated by SpaceX, and it is obviously in the area. The landing is quite precise, so they know pretty close to where we're going to be. And it backs up to the capsule. It has a sort of a crane that reaches over and lifts the capsule out of the water and puts it on the deck of the ship. And then it's, they make sure that it's safe, meaning that there's no hypergolic fumes. Hypergols are used for the reaction control system, which is how we control the attitude during spaceflight and also in the first part of reentry. So there you see the ship backing up to the capsule, which is there on the upper right, and then on the deck, you can see the hatch. It looks a little bit different than it did on Ascent because of the extreme heat of reentry. From the time we touch down in the water to the time the hatch opens is somewhere between 35 and 40 minutes. So it's actually quite brisk. The crew usually are pretty good spirits. You know, after only 2 weeks in space, people are generally feeling pretty good. They can walk, maybe a little bit wobbly. We get out of the capsule into a medical facility to be checked out, and then walk onto a helicopter and lift it off to the nearest airport to continue our journey home in that case. Here's a quick teaser about AX4. Thank you. So we have a few minutes for some questions which have been coming in via the Slido app. One anonymous, showing a lot of activity done on the team. Is team building and creating a link inside the crew vital? Absolutely. I will tell you that there are a lot of attributes that we look in astronauts. Now I'm talking about government astronauts for a second. They have to be pretty proficient in ability to learn systems and execute procedures. Usually they have some kind of operational experience. Maybe they're a pilot or they're a diver. Sometimes they do that as a hobby. All that is very important, but many, many people have those qualifications. Somehow we reduce that number to maybe 100 or so that actually are interviewed by the agency, and I'm speaking about NASA, but I know ESA is pretty similar, and I assume the other agencies do a similar process. And those 100 people are interviewed by a board that consists mostly of astronauts and some managers. And when the interviewee leaves the room, the question everybody asks is, do I want to fly in space with that person? So teamwork is very important. I will say that of the various crew members that I've flown with from my first mission in 1995 until one last year, I would say that is the most important attribute that somebody can have, how they work together as a team, how they can bond with each other, how they can discover each other's strengths and weaknesses. That is what really makes a good crew. Another question, how are the standards different from government missions? So because we're going to the International Space Station, they are not different. The medical standards are exactly the same, the psychological standards are exactly the same, the training standards are the same. Now, when we start flying as an independent space station, we would like to relax at least the medical standards. And the reason is medical standards at NASA and the other agencies are very tough, and they're that way because there's a large investment that the agency puts into the candidates. They want them to serve a long career, flying multiple flights over many years, maybe even decades. For a private astronaut mission, that's not the case. They may just have either a brilliant researcher that wants to continue their one experiment in space, or somebody that is going there because their country has nominated them. So gradually we would like to open up the aperture of people from a health standpoint that can be admitted into space. We're thinking about, in fact, on AX4, we're flying an experiment that will start to open the door to potentially have type 2 diabetics be able to fly, first by measuring how well we can monitor blood sugar in microgravity. Is there a difference? Probably not, but we don't know for sure. So again, using this build-up approach, we're going to do step by step, because ultimately we would like to fly a broader range of people than are able to fly today. The status of plans for AX5 and onward. So as I mentioned, these missions for our company anyway are controlled by NASA. They put out what they call a request for proposals about a month and a half ago. The proposals are due at the end of this month, May, and we expect to hear sometime this summer which company will be selected to do the next 2 private astronaut missions. We have customers for AX5 that are ready to go. And we're expecting that that time frame would be probably Q3, Q4 2026, which would mean we would start training toward the end of this year. What will be the role and responsibilities of Shooks in AX4, and how will it help us? Well, as I mentioned, he's sort of a flag bearer for the Gaganyaan program. Obviously, it's a different capsule and that sort of thing, but his participation in the mission will be very important from the standpoint of how the team at ISRO and the researchers coordinate with him. I can tell you that for ascent and for entry, as the pilot, he will have a large role in assuring the safety of the vehicle. He basically acts as a 2-person cockpit with the commander in sort of a challenge and response, a little bit like a commercial airliner. So nobody is making unilateral decisions. They make sure that they do so as a team. So he'll have a very important role during those phases of flight all the way through docking, and then again starting from undocking to splashdown. But during the mission itself on the ISS, he will be principally interfacing indirectly through teams back in India to help him do the experiments that have been proposed by the researchers here. I'm a little bit over, but I've been told I have a few more minutes, so let me keep going here. What is the role of a commander on board? So first of all, before I get to on board, in the training part of it, we are really there to help gel the team and help build confidence with people's abilities. I would say that training is actually a pretty enjoyable time. There's a lot to learn for sure, but you're doing it as a group. Nobody is holding your feet to the fire. It's kind of a congenial environment, and it's the commander who sort of sets that tone about having confidence, about being able to get through the training and ultimately through the mission. On board, we've evolved the role a little bit. On AX1, I had a suite of experiments that I was performing for Axiom, but that meant that the other astronauts had to rely more on the ISS crew, the resident crew, in that case, Expedition 67, whenever they had questions or problems with their experiments. And now that was a bit of a burden on NASA and the other agencies, and so we decided that the Axiom commander should be more of an advisor at large. I mean, obviously, we still have some dedicated activities, but for the most part, we are available to help set up, tear down, answer questions, and work with the various crew members to get through their science program. Let's see, let me take one more. Contingency plans for launch and reentry. So that's a very good question. When NASA flies a mission, and by the way, the SpaceX is a contractor to us just like they're a contractor to NASA. So they treat us as a company just like they treat NASA missions, with one exception, and that is that NASA missions have the support of the Department of Defense to follow them in their ascent corridor. So as the rocket leaves the launch pad, at any point there is possibility of what they call an escape. So there's a malfunction in the propulsion system, let's say, the capsule will separate from the rocket, and then depending on where they are in that ascent corridor, it will land in the water somewhere between just off the coast of Florida to somewhere near Ireland. And so the Department of Defense deploys a team to be ready to exact a rescue in that case. Obviously, they're not going to bring that boat all the way to wherever it is. So it involves having rescue jumpers come into the water with a lifeboat. Basically, they will use a jet ski to pull the capsule in an orientation to stabilize it, and at that point, they'll attach the life raft, open the hatch, the crew members get out, and then they'll be extracted generally by helicopter. So since the Department of Defense can't really do that for a private company, we have really helped stand up a separate organization called Operator Solutions that does exactly that thing. And with the same, they lease the equipment or they lease the air services. We bought the equipment, so the jet ski, the life raft, all that stuff. And we've done an extraction exercise before AX1 where we were in a capsule mock-up off the coast of Florida. They flew overhead with an airplane, dropped the packages out with the rescue package plus 6 different rescue swimmers, and it was a big success. So obviously, safety in all of this is paramount, and we try to leave no stone unturned when we embark on these missions. For entry, it's a bit different. It's the cases of entry where you have to come back in a hurry are a little bit less, well, they're fairly predictable. So unless something goes really wrong, we will land somewhere near the coast, and we will know that within enough time to make sure that there's somebody there to get us out of the spacecraft. Pretty unusual if we were to do an unprepared landing to an unprepared place, but there is that possibility. So let me close by saying thank you for your attention. I am very excited about this place that we find ourselves. I don't know if you attended the previous session, but Clay said this is a great time to be involved with space. It is truly, probably since the Apollo era, the most exciting time with this transition from just pure government to a mix of government and private space activity. And Axiom is very proud to be at the forefront of all of that. Thank you very much.
Great thanks to Michael. It's always great to hear from him. We are even a bit early in our sequence, but I think we should proceed immediately with our next global networking session. And this will be another keynote, and this time it will focus on expanding access to the Indian space sector and international outlook. And it is my distinct pleasure to welcome here on stage to deliver this keynote Dr. Vinod Kumar, Director of the Promotion Directorate of the In-Space Department of Space. Mr. Kumar, please.
Okay, and this is for next, yeah. So, very good afternoon. Namaste to all. Welcome to this unique initiative which Government of India has initiated. I'll go through that what is happening in India for global collaboration as well as to build the space ecosystem in the country. So my title, as it says, expanding access to Indian space sector, international outreach. So as you all know, it's a very famous slide to begin with, that what we started with a humble beginning in 1963 with a nose cone on a bicycle to a macho vehicle, LVM-3, and this is what we have achieved. Then comes, we are known for developing the fragile technologies and techniques. You see here, we were having on a black car testing of RF interface. That is the kind of thing, and to the state-of-art facilities, we have achieved this. Why this slide, I will tell you that we went with the first satellite, Aryabhata, which was just 360 kg to the around 6,000 kg, and GSAT-11, which is, if you see tip to tip, it is 27 meter. So these are the kind of capability we developed in the space sector in addition to space applications in each aspect. So considering this, Government of India came out that we should bring all the space actors into the space. Friends, as you all know, is that contribution of India for astronomical observations is tremendous. It was in 500 AD when Aryabhata gave the planetary motion. They are true to today also with some error. And you know what happened to Galileo, I did not mention. So if you divide the space into 4 parts, we can divide space 1, 2, 3, 4. 1 was the astronomical observations. 2 is race to space. Because when you know that me first, but when you see that outcome of this space race was the landing, Apollo landing on the moon. Then comes the space 3, where global cooperation and space applications begin. The outcome of space 3 was the International Space Station, the marvelous peace in the space, and doing a lot of research. Then came the paradigm shift for the space sector, for commercialization of space became. And it was in 2020, Government of India taking this, brought in the new actors into the play with the space sector reform, and Indian National Space Promotion and Authorization Center was formed on 24 June 2020. What is in space is that enables private companies to carry out end-to-end activities. I'll define it later. We addresses promotion, authorization, we are enabler and supervisor of space. It's a unique body which has 2 roles. We are a space regulator also and promoter also. Then our in-space board consists of, is an autonomous body attached to the Department of Space, which has members from academia, industry, and government bodies. New Space India Limited, as you know, is the commercial wing of ISRO, involves in the technology transfer to the private companies, and ISRO will continue to work as developing advanced technology and capacity building. This chart I know very important to just get to the international audience, because we were asked many times questions on this, what is the structure of Department of Space. Here if you see that Chairman ISRO is the Secretary Department of Space and Chairman Space Commission. We have 14 plus centers, they are expert in each sphere of the space. Like they have expertise, like Vikram Sarabhai Space Center is launch vehicle expert. Expertise lies there. Liquid propulsion system, URAO satellite center, satellite making. So each center has expertise in their own, and we have Department of Space has several autonomous bodies and central public sector enterprises like Antariksh and NSIL. Then came in 2020, I was telling in space, where is a part of Department of Space, and I will just show our organization structure, where chairman in space is Dr. Pawan Goenka. He is advised by InSpace board. He is the member of Space Commission. We have 3 directorate. Promotion directorate is at Bangalore, headed by me. Program management and authorization director and technical directorate are at our InSpace headquarters, which is at Ahmedabad. We have a legal, finance, and administration wing headed by a joint secretary level IAS officer. They sit at our in-space headquarters. What is in-space? The cornerstone of space sector reform. If you see, we have 4 wheels. We call it promoter, enabler, authorizer, and supervisor. And in each heading, in the promotion activity, the first activity which we completed in 2023-24 was development of decadal vision and strategy for commercial space in India. I'll touch upon with some slides later. We are mandated for industry outreach, international outreach, engagement with academia also. We have done certain things with them. We will touch upon them. As a enabler of space, we nurture and support for startups. We enable access to ISRO space facilities and major being technology transfer. Then as a authorizer, we authorize activities. Any activity in space is authorized by InSpace. We act as a single window agency. Means when application comes, we see the interdepartmental clearance is taken by us. We provide supervisory role also to guide the non-government entities to facilitate their design review and oversee project implementation. These are some roles, and after our formation, what all initiative we took? See, we were formed in June 2020, but operationalized in June 2022. Then it was in April 2023 that revised comprehensive Indian space policy was brought in with Department of Space. Then revised FDI guideline, foreign direct investment policy was in 2024 February it was released. It's a very lucrative policy than earlier. Then we released norm guidelines and procedures in 2024. Space activity is at final stage where we will be getting, it will be going to the parliament shortly. The purpose of all this is to take the space economy from around 2% to around 8 to 10% in the next decade. Indian Space Policy 2023 was announced on 6th April 23. It is a comprehensive overarching policy encompassing all these 8 activities. There is no, under this policy, there is no restriction on non-government entities. They can build their own rockets and satellites. They can own and operate space assets. They can acquire EO data, Earth observation data and dissemination, create infrastructure in ISRO premises. They can use facilities and create infrastructure in Department of Space facilities. These are the kind of policy shift which came, and these all 4 actors which are in space, that is like ISRO, Indian Space Research Organization, they have developed capacity in each space domain. They will continue to do technology development, continue with scientific missions, share technology, products and processes, and best practices with non-government entities. In space, I have discussed with you in detail. New Space India Limited is the commercial wing of ISRO. Then comes non-government entities. I have touched in the previous slide, wherein they are permitted to carry out any activity under the sun in the space sector. That's the dramatic shift from the previous, where it was a controlled regime. Now, foreign direct investment policy in the space sector has been revised. Earlier, it was 100% through administrative route, but presently what has been done, you see the cap in a space sector under these 3 verticals is upper cap is 100%, but there are sectoral caps. Like satellite manufacturing and operation of space data product and value addition, the automatic route has been capped as 74. When I say automatic route, it means that you have to inform RBI and InSpace and you start working from day one. Beyond that is also possible, that is through administrative route, if there is some advanced technology or other reasons to be recorded. So again, their cap is 100%. Launch vehicle and associated systems and subsystem, the automatic cap has been capped at 49%. But beyond that is also possible wherever it is likely to result in access to advanced technology or other reasons to be recorded. And if you say manufacturing of subsystems for satellites and ground segment and user segment is capped at 100% automatic route. So this is a very lucrative policy which has been in operation. Automatic route is already operational. Administrative route guidelines are coming shortly. And if you see this, how space ecosystem is developing in the country. Main actor ISRO, in space and New Space India Limited. We have private companies, 50 plus private companies are there. Medium, small and micro enterprises are 450 plus. And we are happy to tell you, I will say later, we have 300 plus space startups within this short span. And you see what other activities in space has initiated. As I have told you, the decadal vision and strategy were released in 2023-24. We have $125 million venture capitalist first. It is a fund to be managed by SIDBI, the fund manager. This is fund category 2, which will be managed by SIDBI but advised by InSpace. We have another very unique, that there are many technologies which are at TRL 3, 4, and if any company, anyone wants to develop and take them to the TRL 8, 9, 10, we have a fund of up to 500 crore. This fund is also operational. We are looking for the proposals from the company, and up to 25 crore InSpace will pay them. In venture capital fund, 1,000 crore is government contribution. Private people will also be permitted to contribute to this. It may become 10,000 crore and more, or that is anyone's guess. Small satellite launch vehicle, we are transferring technology from ISRO to 6 NGEs are identified for final RFP. We have very unique program on PSLV last stage, where private companies are flying their products on that and getting experience at least 1.5 months at a very moderate price, plus guidance from ISRO and InSpace. We are not leaving even academicians, students. So we have very unique experience that is called Pre-Incubation Entrepreneurship Development Program, where final year plus graduates can give any idea which they have in a space sector, which we will get it reviewed and take it to the next phase. It is a 3-phase program where they ideate, innovate, and demonstrate. We pay each stage some money, and if they demonstrate successfully, they are eligible for seed fund scheme up to 1 CR. That I am telling in Indian rupees. Now, working with state government is also very unique space ecosystem in the country which is coming. We have signed memorandum of undertaking with Gujarat government, Tamil Nadu government, and last week it happened with Karnataka government. It was just 2 days before we came here. So this is a very unique. State governments are coming with incentives for the private companies, and we are enabling them. In the space park, we will provide them support for lab plus expertise. Earth observation constellation is already announced. Around 12 satellites will be made with public-private participation and with the support from InSpace. Norms, guidelines, and procedures, I have told, we have already announced. Very important thing has happened first time in the history of India is again that Indian orbital resource is allocated to the one private company, and more will come in the future, and they will start making satellite, and within 2-3 years they will launch it. I have discussed very unique part is that we should know how space economy is contributing to the national GDP. In this direction, we prepared a report and we worked with the Ministry of Statistical and Program Implementation. We are working to know what is the contribution of space economy, and interdepartmental committee, it is where we are meeting regularly. We have started collecting data to know whether really what is the contribution in space of space sector in the national GDP. So there are a couple of more things, but to assess further impact, what has happened with after 2022, I will say, because 2020 it was announced and we were operationalized in 2022 only. You see 658 applications we have received from various non-government entities. And if you see year-wise cumulative, you see we have 97 before 2022. It was in August 2022, we have developed our website and we started taking online proposal. As you see the growth, We have 658 proposals, and they cover each aspect. You see, whether it's a launch vehicle, satellite making, ground segment, promotional activities, or space applications, each sphere we have the proposals from the private company. Means Indian ecosystem is growing, and these are the kind of some statistics which are very validated, and we take fees also for each application given for authorization. How startup ecosystem is growing? You see, we have just a 7 around company in 2016. Presently, it has gone to 300 plus. That's the another thing. The investment in private sector is also growing exponentially, and which has reached up to $430 million. You see, 2016, we have just $2 million, and we are going this. So the how things are going, this is all because these are our star companies. This is not a comprehensive system, list of the companies. We have many more. But you see, we have companies in launch systems, we have in satellite system, we have in ground segments, we have in space solution, space data application also. Our companies are doing very good internationally even. Continuing with this, our private companies has started launching their satellite and suborbital flight also. Total 15 flights are carried till now. We'll update this. POEM payloads are also there, equally good number. Now, the very important aspect which we have seen is the skilling, lack of skilling in our non-government entities and academia. So what we did, we designed 10 courses for the benefit of private companies specifically, and we are happy to know that ISRO is fully supporting this, this venture, wherein we have trained till now around 560 plus CEOs, CXOs and academicians in the space sector. They are unique 10 courses where space tech for agriculture sector to the mission design and avionics development for launch vehicle, to the A to Z of satellite, to the recently conducted the fundamentals of launch vehicle, the propulsion system, they had a dedicated course. So each and every course we have captured, and they are very delivered. We have completed one cycle, second cycle we are starting soon. Now, we need to develop next generation to take up the space activities. So for that, catch them young is the philosophy under which we have designed a space tech curriculum for BTech minor degree. It was approved by All India Council of Technical Education last year on 20th of August. And I'm very happy to tell that all over the country, 15 institutions and universities are working with us to adopt space tech in their curriculum. The numbers are very mind-boggling, where a BTech minor introduction is announced and there is a lot of registrations. Even they are caught unaware. I have been told 100 plus registration will happen. One of the IIT, when they started, there are 140 registration and they have to cut down the class. So these are the kind of enthusiasm, and I have been told for PhD also, 140 application has come in space tech. These are the kind of things, but we are not leaving it here. We are helping them with expertise support. We have started a immersion program for the student, where 1 week they will be lodged in the in space technical headquarters. They will be taught all the nitty-gritty of space, what all testing, how you design, and this 1 week program has been already started and initiated. This has got a very good response from the student. We have also come out with a scheme of setting up Center of Excellence at academic institutions. All over India, we will install 7 Center of Excellence in each region of the country, available for the private companies academicians, students to go work there and do their projects. Not leaving them to impart further practical training. I'll tell you, Kansai small satellite competition we started last year. It was very successful. Now we have come out with the 2nd edition, and the model rocketry competition also started. I can tell you the enthusiasm in Indian youth is so that last year competition, around 80 plus team participated, and we final was around 28 we selected. But all of them got placement. They were very enthusiastic. Presently in model rocketry and Kansai, around 100 teams are already reached to the CDR stage. So this is to impart them practical training on the space systems. Now, if you see that India's GDP is growing, We are fifth largest or really fourth. We aim or aspire to become third largest. And you see, this is the way our economy is growing. What is the purpose of this? The space sector. Presently, we are around 2% of the global economy. But we aspire to become 8% to 44 billion. But there is an export component around 11 and 33. These are our aspirations, which we hope. And this is only for commercial space. And if you add defense, it will be double, I am sure. Now, these are the 8 areas we have identified where in East, like Earth observation, 28% CAGR is expected. Overall CAGR is around 16%, navigation, communication, and you see ground network, satellite manufacturing, launch segment, space station awareness, in-orbit economy. If you see, these are our statistics which we have done, and we are working for it, mainly for demand generation. Our aim is whole of the nation approach to implement this decadal vision and to see that we reach a certain number. So this is participation by all, not only by government. It needs citizen resources, private sector resources, government resources, and enabling parameter has been already done, like Indian space policy, FDI policy, and the aim of this is to develop the space culture in the country, and where basic enablers are ISRO, in space, Department of Space. And if you continue same way, we have identified 4 pillars to achieve this, the major being the build platforms, create ecosystem, enhance industry participation, enable that, and international outreach. In this, demand generation is very important, which we are working with the state governments. Each ministry we have written, we are having an application workshop with them to see that we achieve our target plus more. Now, international outreach is very important activity. What are the strengths and capabilities of India? As you know, it is well demonstrated by ISRO that we are pioneer in developing indigenous technology in full spectrum of space activities. We are cost effective, we are well known and high quality nation, which have strong adherence to the global standards. That's why there is in our policies also that we will share the best practices with the non-government entities, and we are working in that direction. And in this space, we'll continue to work as a facilitator and enabler for the private sector and bridging the gap with ISRO. Outreach activities also we carry out. We participate in various international forums. We carry our non-government entities with us. We facilitate B2B, G2B, various meetings. And I'm very happy to tell that we have identified the regions for relationship for like SAARC nation, Asian, Middle East, Act East policy. We are trying to work with them for global collaboration and capacity building. See, we carried out one study on international outreach where with the Research and Innovation Center, where we have identified 3 global zones, primary being the Indian Ocean region, where what we can do with them. We have a second group is global developing and spacefaring nations. What all is possible, in which area we can collaborate with them. And the third being the global and mature nations. We are not leaving any actor in the space sector. If you are a mature nation, we would like to work with you. We would like to know more technology from you. What all areas for collaboration are available? Technology transfer and R&D. Demand generation is very important, and we are taking our private companies to see what all in the space sector we can do with each department of the government. And you see talent development, joint funding, strategy for resources and infrastructure. But with whom all we can work? We can work with foreign government, private companies being main actor. I am seeing morning itself, there have been a presentation, private sector participation, but we have started in 2020. But we see the global impact of our companies in various sectors. This study says that with developing to developed nations, how we can collaborate. So these are the areas which we can find out. We are not, it's a win-win and mutual benefit collaboration we will promote. So as you know, after formation of InSpace, we have built relationship direct with over 45 plus countries. We have very unique concept of conducting international space days. Till now, we have conducted 7 space days. They are very fruitful. What we do, we identify the companies from India and another country which wants to work with us, and virtually we connect first, and some cases in person also. Whereas we give them pitching this thing. After that, connections develop. We are very happy to see in these 7 space days, a lot of connections has come up, which has been started and fructified. And you see, with beginning, we have 290 plus cooperative agreement with 60 plus countries, that is with ISRO and Department of Space. You know, in last year, Honorable Prime Minister of India and Italy has already announced joint action plan, and we are working with very closely with Italian friends to implement it further. And I would be very happy to tell you that our cooperation with Australia is at very high. I can see that around 30 to 40 agreements, LOI by private companies are already signed with the Australian companies, and they are working together and getting benefited with both nations' approach plus expertise. You see that we carried the space delegation to the foreign countries to expose them to the international forum. We go to every IAC, and we are planning a big delegation to IAC at Sydney in September, October, I think. Then US, we have taken delegation, Dubai, Australia, Singapore, Japan, and many more are coming. We are a part working with US Civil Space Working Group, the US IBC, we are a member of the Quad. And these all things, initiatives are to project India globally and their capacities. And you know, this slide, I had a very unique slide where what all government of India has approved the coming missions. It's a Bharatiya Antariksh Station, Chandrayaan, Gaganyaan. So many missions are there where that are in offering and available for working. To work with us is very easy. In space digital platform, in space.gov.in, each individual, industry, national, international can register there. You will be given a unique user ID password where you can tell about yourself and see what all capacity is available in India. This is a very single reusable data model and very enthusiastic. We are seeing around 8,000 plus registrations are there where all MSME, large, medium, all kind of industries are available with us. With these few words, thank you, and I am available for any question. Now, I'll take from here. Yeah. So first question is by Mr. Ramkumar. Can you please throw some light about the tuning up of Indian manufacturing industry in meeting the requirement of startups? Yeah, it's very important question. See, basically what we do in space as a promoter plus authorizer, we carry out the reviews. Periodic reviews are carried out and we guide them. See, one of the company was launching their satellite. We guided them and asked them, you do this change, do this change. Now, this manufacturing requires, see, space law is 0 defect, 100% quality. So we ensure that, and when after our review committees has passed it, and it was a 100% success. So like this, we are doing not only for launch vehicle, same thing is done for satellite, very unique model. Now, second is, how is space exploration as an activity different from other space activities such as human space flight, satellite launch, that was mentioned somewhere in the slide number, blah, blah. Okay. See, space exploration, in fact, when you launch any object in space, it's an academic question. So anything that goes from out of space atmosphere is a space exploration. But what you do, if you are going interplanetary mission, that will also come. You have a low Earth orbit, it is simple. You go there and achieve some required delta V and start rotating and start services towards that. But in case, let's say you are going to moon. So what happens? You have to plan. You have to pass through the gravitational pull. If you are going to the moon orbit, you have to pass through the gravitational pull of the moon. And that's why, many nations failed to land on the moon. So they are the different technologies. We can discuss it at a detail. And you see with GEO you are going, there's a different way of going there and operationalize where you have to tune it to the orbit rate of the Earth. So interplanetary mission is different. You pass through different environment and plus communication technologies, and they are different there because you need to go to the larger distance. If you are going to Mars, Moon even, you need high precision guidance, navigation and positioning information as well. The next is Ramakrishna Reddy. Is there any relaxation or flexible policy being considered for customs handling, taxation to import space sector related components, including electronic component, which is a bottleneck now? I agree with you, but you must have seen in the last budget, Government of India has already announced and it is being operationalized shortly. We are working on this with the government and Ministry of Finance, and shortly you will listen. Chairman ISRO and Secretary DOS has already written a letter to the ministry. We are also following up on this. Certainly, we don't want to impose any undue duty on our startups or space industry because it's a budding sector. Very nice question. Next is, how are startups scrutinized before being promoted? Yeah, very, very important question. There are many ways. First thing, we will take the information on that. Yes, we have a definite way. Government channels are there. Ministry of MCA is there. DPIT registration is there. We check certain things. We will not tell you in the open forum, but rest assured that no person who is not having capability in this and which is not really into that field, I can tell you we have a dedicated industry wing. They know even date of birth of their CEO and CFO. So that's the kind of relation we built with them and try to see that they are true companies which are in the space sector. Any company which is registered, not working with us, we carry out dedicated review if they give us for any application for authorization. The another last but not the least question is, with 100% FDI in startups, how can we ensure that key knowledge and technology does not go to unfavorable entities? Any NDAs are signed? Yes, very right question. And NDAs are in place, NDA, MOU format. We discussed this not only with Ministry of External Affairs, if it is outside company, but also our legal teams. We are having a dedicated panel of lawyers at our panel, where everything, any MOU which we sign, it goes through their vetting. I think one more question has come. In space, working on assisting India with establishing a proper space legislation. Yes, it was with Department of Space where all the actors' inputs were taken and final committee it is there. Anytime it will come for public opinion, whatever way Government of India decide, it can come for public opinion if government wants. Is India open to welcome and work with foreign-born startups that want to expand in India? With open arms, we will welcome you in India in any form. We are there to help you. I have told you 3 caps. Autonomous route is working with perfectly all right. Even tomorrow you can start working and identify your partners. We can suggest you as of now, please register at our website. Look for the startups which are good. If you want, we will point some finger to some, but it will be your assessment. We don't come in between in your collaboration. But yes, the guidance will be very proper. I think that's all. Thank you very much for all your questions. I'm done with it.
A big thanks to Dr. Kumar for this very deep insight in the development of India's space ecosystem and the strategy that is taken up here. That brings us to the end of this morning GNF block, and we are breaking for lunch now. I would like to inform you and remind you that during the lunch break now, we will have our first session of the interactive presentations on the 5th floor, so one floor down, and please take advantage of all these excellent presentations at the IP area. After lunch, we will meet you here again at 2:30, so please be in time for another very important and exciting highlight lecture on China's exploration, deep space exploration program. And with that, I wish you a nice lunch and enjoy. See you back at 2:30.